and the costs that we incur, of course, we want to come to the House as soon as we can to make sure we are setting out. And of course, he's right. Steel strategy this year needs to be bold, and we will, of course, look to the work that his committee has done to help us do that.
So, all the Liberal Democrats suppose, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Can I start by associating the Liberal Democrats with the Minister's remarks in support of those affected employees, families and communities by this latest development, and we welcome the Minister coming to the House today to provide some clarity. Steel is a sector of huge strategic importance for our country. It provides vital materials for our national infrastructure, from defence to renewable energy, and it creates thousands of jobs across the UK. The neglect of the steel industry in recent years is just another part of the previous government's disastrous legacy. With Putin's barbaric war in Europe and Donald Trump's damaging tariffs causing economic turmoil, securing the future of steel production in this country is more important than ever, and that's why the Liberal Democrats firmly believe that nothing should be off the table in supporting this critical sector. But for too long, our steel industry has been neglected. The Conservative government oversaw a string of near collapses and last-minute deals. They scrapped the industrial strategy, which is so vital to our manufacturers, and they placed new trade barriers which constrained our exporters. So in light of this latest insolvency, will the Minister set out what actions the government is taking to set our steel industry on a truly sustainable footing? What reassurance can the government provide that job losses can be avoided in the future? And what progress has been made in bringing down industrial electricity prices through the measures announced in the industrial strategy? And what is the government doing to press President Trump to finally drop his damaging 25% tariffs on our steel exports? And finally, what steps is the government taking to treat steel as the nationally strategic asset that it is, ensuring that more British-made steel is used to power our national infrastructure and other major projects here in the UK? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Can I thank the Honourable Lady for her remarks, and I think she is right to ask how are we ensuring that this nationally strategic asset is protected, and we are doing that. I've just set out the reduction in terms of the energy prices that the steel industry as a whole will benefit from, extending the supercharger to give network charges relief from 60% to 90%, which will bring significant lower costs in terms of energy prices for our steel industry. We are prioritising procurement of British steel when the government is spending money, because we believe that that is the right thing to do. We've already introduced protections in terms of steel trading, and we are ensuring that we are doing everything we can, talking to our US counterparts all the time about reaching a conclusion in terms of the negotiations on our steel on the steel tariffs, and I am optimistic about those conversations. Of course, I speak to officials and other ministers about this all the time. I speak to the steel industry all the time. We are very lucky to have a steel council which we've put together, trade unions, industry and others who are helping us to develop what we think will be a very ambitious steel strategy, which will ensure that the steel industry will not decline. We will not be in a position where we are currently, where only 30% of the steel that we use in this country is made in this country, and we will be in a position where we can protect those good jobs, experienced jobs, good people that we want to support and make sure the industry grows.
Sarah.
Thank you, Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you'll be aware that as long as I've been an MP, I've been coming to this chamber arguing to support speciality steel in my constituency. And can I politely say to the Shadow Minister, the different response we've got from this government is night and day for what I've had under the Conservatives. And I personally want to thank the Minister for having such an open door policy, and the Secretary of State, to myself and my honourable friend from Stocksbridge, and I know that you're doing everything you can to save this speciality business. But can I say that one of the first actions of the official receivers was to release approximately 30 apprenticeships due to start their training in the next few weeks? So can the Minister reassure the House that not only will the government commit to the business, but the business can only survive with the highly skilled, committed professional staff, and that you're as the Minister is as committed to them as she is to the business?
Can I thank my honourable friend for those remarks, and they're very gratefully received, and we will continue to do all we can to support the steel industry. She's absolutely right that a number of apprentices who was due to start this week were told by the official receiver took the decision that given they just couldn't guarantee the 12-month continuation of the apprentices, it was the right thing to do to try and find them other places to go for their apprenticeships. I am taking a close personal interest in what happens to those 50 people. The local authority, I know, and the DFE are trying to make sure we can find other places for them to go. I want to make sure that we can, because one of the things this government is very, very passionate about is ensuring our young people have the apprenticeships to give them the support for the jobs that we know we lead into the future.
Sir Gavin Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister's obviously incredibly committed to the steel industry, as we all are, but manufacturing is going to continue to struggle in this country where it's paying energy prices so much higher than competitors in Germany and France. Can the Minister assure the House that in a year's time, following the government strategy, manufacturers, whether it's ceramics or steel, will be paying the same amount for their industrial energy prices as their German and French competitors?
Minister.
The honourable gentleman makes a good point. Of course, our energy prices are too high and it's difficult for companies to compete, and we are taking action to address that. In the first instance, by expanding the supercharger, which will make a significant difference to those industries that use extensive amounts of energy. We are also introducing an electricity scheme, which will be introduced in 2027, because it is a complex process. It will take time to bring in, but from 2027, around 7,000 companies across the country will also have significant reductions in their energy costs. We are taking what we believe to be the right measures in our industrial strategy through those two interventions to make sure our energy costs come down and we can be competitive across our European counterparts.
Dr. Bridgeton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Liberty's Speciality Steel UK has failed its highly skilled workers. This ongoing situation has been deeply concerning, so I'm really delighted to the Minister this morning for offering her solidarity and the government's support for the incredible workforce at the sites in South Yorkshire. And it's hugely positive and a great contrast after 14 years of the Conservatives that this government has stepped in by appointing an official receiver to try to protect the over 1,400 jobs at those two sites, including Stocksbridge Speciality Steels in my constituency. The Secretary of State has recognised in this chamber the strategic significance for national security of those sites, and we must ensure these businesses are supported to fulfil their capability and have, as the Minister recognised today, a strong future. Can the Minister commit to taking adequate time to find a responsible buyer with the right deal, and during that time that workers are kept in employment with salaries continued to be paid, as well as ongoing efforts are made by her and the official receiver to resolve the outstanding pension issues?
Minister.
My right honourable friend and I have spoken many times, and she is such a champion, as are many of my colleagues, in terms of supporting the industry that we know that we need. And she's right to point to the work that Stocksbridge does and how important that is for us as a country. And of course, we will do what we need to do through the process of the official receiver, make sure that people are getting the salaries that they need. And of course, we know for the last couple of years, so many of those people have been on furlough, and we want to turn that around. We believe that there is a viable industry here that is languishing unnecessarily, and if government provides the right support through interventions such as our energy reduction measures, and we work together with the official receiver on, there are multiple companies, I should tell my honourable friend, coming forward who are interested. We need to establish how viable those offers are and what the best situation is. And of course, the official receiver has to think of the creditors and what's the best outcome for the creditors in terms of their work. But of course, we take a close interest in that. And she's right to point out the issue around pensions. And I know there is uncertainty, in the official receiver and Teneo are looking at these issues now to see exactly what has been paid and what hasn't paid, so that we can unpick the pensions issue.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. This is obviously the second time that we have seen a crisis in the steel industry in the last year. This impacts across other industries that are commercially operated that are critical for our national security. In Lancashire, the failure to place an order for 25 Typhoon jets is risking thousands of jobs in the critical defence industry of BAE Systems. We're also seeing a lack of join-up between government departments, not realising that whole life cycle manufacturing of nuclear fuel, which is equally critical for our national infrastructure, and impacting on hundreds of highly skilled jobs in Lancashire at the Westinghouse Springfield site. So could the Minister update me on the work that she is doing with the Department for Defence to ensure that these commercially operated industries that are critical to our national defence capabilities and national security are properly strategically supported to be sustainable into the future?
Minister.
Can I thank him for the question? He's right to point out the importance of our defence industry and the need for us to support that. And of course, the industrial strategy outlined 8 growth-driving sectors that we believe, through support from government, can really turbocharge in terms of growth. And defence was one of those. We've published the 8 sector plans, apart from the defence one, which will be coming shortly. So he should look out for that. Of course, we've increased funding on defence very significantly. That will lead to thousands of jobs across the UK. And I work very closely with my colleagues in defence, particularly the Defence Procurement Minister, to make sure we are procuring UK jobs where we can and supporting our industry to grow.
Clyde Betts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First of all, thank the Minister for her action. After 14 years of inaction from the party opposite, it's a welcome change. Sheffield, of course, is synonymous with steel, particularly special steels, after Harry Greeley invented stainless steel in the city over 100 years ago. I say to the Minister, she mentioned public procurement and consideration being given, I think the word she used, to the purchase of British steel. Could I just ask her to be clearer about what consideration means? I hope it means more than simply looking at the narrow issue of specific costs for a product, but look at the wider benefits to the steel engineering and wider economy of purchasing UK steel. Will she assure us that when public procurement takes place, those wider considerations come into effect?
Minister.
Can I thank my honourable friend for his question? And yes, I mean, within the realms of what we can do legally in terms of subsidies and within those parameters, I want to make sure we are making sure, the Cabinet Office is very keen to make sure that where we are spending public money, we are buying British, and that the value of that is recognised in terms of the contracts that we pursue. So the value of those British jobs, the value of where they are around the country is recognised. And I think, you know, he talks about the importance of steel in his area, and I've talked with colleagues about developing a steel corridor, which I think is really important, and we are pursuing through the steel strategy.
Chris Philp.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the Minister's right to come here today to give this statement on such an important part of national infrastructure. It's just a shame there's no Minister had ever given a statement in this House on Grangemouth. We've now learned the Chancellor met the Chair at INEOS, Jim Ratcliffe, just 3 weeks ago, just 3 weeks before Petro INEOS Grangemouth closed, but didn't even as much as raise the refinery with him. In her statement, Minister said, Mr. Speaker, the Government stands with affected steelworkers in Rotherham, Sheffield and Wednesbury. We stand with their families. Quite right, so do we in the SNP. So why did this Labour Government never stand with the workers of Grangemouth?
I'm not quite sure. It's up to the Minister if she wants to answer it. But Grangemouth, it is steel rather than petroleum. But I'm sure the Minister may wish to.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I mean, just to say, we have very much stood with the workers in Grangemouth. We're investing through the National Wealth Fund £200 million to support that development. I've had multiple conversations, and we've spoken multiple times in this place on how we're going to support industry in Grangemouth to transition and to grow, and to support those workers who are, where they are losing jobs, are receiving significant support. So I fundamentally disagree with his painting of that picture.
Olivia Black.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the Minister for her action. Steel remains a key part of the South Yorkshire industrial, economic and strategies. Can the Minister reassure the House that workers' wages and livelihoods will continue to be prioritised throughout the whole of this process? And will she join me in thanking the members for Penistone and Stocksbridge and Rotherham Central for their work to champion not only the sites in Stocksbridge and Rotherham, but the South Yorkshire Steel Corridor?
Minister.
Thank you, and of course I join that gratitude for having such amazing colleagues who stand up for what they know to be right and sensible. We're not protecting something that is not worth protecting. We're protecting something that we think has a really vibrant, viable future, and that's what we're trying to work towards. And of course, also working closely with South Yorkshire Mayoral Combined Authority and the Mayor, because there is, through advanced manufacturing more broadly in the region, the Innovation District, the Research Centre, there is a huge wealth of expertise and talent that we can build on.
Julian.
I'm very grateful to the Minister for the frankness of her statement. Can she reassure the House that the fact that she says the director of the company is under investigation for suspected fraud, fraudulent trading and money laundering will not in any way hold up any remedial steps the government needs to take in support of the industry and its workforce? And for the background knowledge of the House, can she give us an indication of precisely what sort of specialisms this particular plant offers in terms of its naming of itself as a speciality steels enterprise?
Minister.
I think the honourable gentleman should perhaps go for a tour, and he could see what the speciality is. But defence, aerospace, industrial engineering, that's in the Stockbridge site. The Rotherham site has 2 electric arc furnaces which feed the Stockbridge site, and there's huge expertise. There are a number of other sites as well that do various different sectors that feed the automotive industry, hydraulics, a whole range of goods. So it's very much a range of specialisms. Just on the work being done in terms of the investigations, so the official receiver will be looking now at what's true and what's not true in terms of, because there haven't been any numbers published in terms of accounts for many years, and they'll be establishing what may or may not have happened. The Secretary of State has written actually to the Insolvency Service today to ask them to take special account of that Serious Fraud Office investigation to make sure they're passing over any information they uncover to the Serious Fraud Office to ensure they can do their work as well.
I'd like to congratulate the Minister on the divisive decisions that she's actually made in the last few weeks. We in Sheffield are very, very proud of our steel, and we want to keep it. We want to resurrect it. We want people to be able to be proud of the city and get the jobs that they, get into the same work for new people as their grandparents probably did many years ago. But I do want to say the reassurances that you have given my constituents who have been in contact with me will be very, very relieved. Yes. But I would ask that if you could, in particular, clarify the pension issues, that would offer even more reassurances. But I would just like to say that I am so proud to hear our Minister speaking about steel and quite disgusted about the way the Shadow Minister and other people on that side have tried to pretend that they did not run down the steel. They never even had a steel strategy in all the years we've been there. So I think they really ought to apologise for the absolute rubbish.
Apologise.
Okay, thanks folks. Minister.
Can I thank my honourable friend for pointing out the failings of the opposition, which I think we all understand very well. In terms of the pension issue, I absolutely recognise the kind of concern that people are going to have. We just have to let the official receiver sort of get under the skin of that and work out what has been paid and what hasn't, because that isn't clear. Once we know, we will look into that and do what needs to be done. But I don't want to say something until we actually know the reality of it.
Richard Tice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I congratulate the Minister and the Government on doing the right thing in supporting our steel industry? I've been expressing concern about Liberty Steel since 2021. And it'll be interesting. This is a critical moment where the private sector investment can be attracted into electric arc furnaces with electricity prices where they are. Minister, I think there's a better solution, which I've spoken about outside of this House, which is to merge speciality steels with British Steel to create a cohesive, excellent, strong champion of our steel industry that we all say we support into the future and invest in it. That's the way to ensure economic growth in this country.
Minister.
Can I thank him for his question? The official receiver is independent. Of course, we are very interested in and keeping in close touch with them about what may or may not come out of that. The idea he suggests is not necessarily a foolish one on this occasion. But what the official receiver has to legally do, this is a legal process, they have to think of the creditors who have suffered throughout this, and we have to think of them as well and make sure we do the right thing. But we will continue to do everything we can to make sure there is a viable future in whatever form that takes.
Jessica Moore.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Very much like others, appreciate the support being given today and the wider work being done on energy prices, procurement and more, which I have to say is in complete contrast to the party opposite, who had no steel strategy, as my honourable friend said, and a woeful record over 14 years on steel. However, market conditions are particularly tough, a point that was made to me very strongly by trade union representatives at Lamwern Steelworks over the summer. So please will the Minister ensure we support the steel industry as a whole, which includes Lamwern, and which makes sure that Wales gets its share of the Green Steel Fund.
Minister.
Can I thank my honourable friend, and we've been talking about this before Parliament returns in terms of how we make sure we support Lamwern and the work that is done there. She is right, you know, this is a difficult time for the steel industry. There are headwinds that we need to address. We need to conclude the negotiations with our US counterparts. We need to bring in the energy price reductions that will make a big difference, and we need the steel strategy. All of these things we are putting in place, and we believe there is a great future for steel in South Wales, and we will continue to support it.
Dr. Andrew Morrison.
Speaker, the British warships are made with a mixture of UK and non-UK steel content. What impact will this announcement have on that mix, and in particular, what impact will it have on the Type 26 frigate programme, about which we had some good news earlier this week?
Can I thank him for his question? Navantia, who, as you know, are building 3 ships, have recently gone into a contract with Liberty, actually, to use them for their steel. That's in the DL plant in Scotland rather than here, so it's unaffected by the announcements that we've made today. And of course, I work very closely with my colleagues in the Ministry of Defence to make sure where we can, we are using British steel, and we have the right infrastructure across the country producing the right types of steel. We produce some types of steel for defence and not for others, some types of steel for shipping and not others, and we need to make sure we're doing everything we can to protect those British jobs and produce what we can here in the UK.
Chris Philp.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I do think the Shadow Minister's response would have been enhanced if he'd at least acknowledged that this government is literally picking up the pieces of the chaotic dismemberment of the steel industry that happened on their watch. I worked at Stocksbridge and Rotherham, and I'd like to pay tribute to the workforce there, but also to the dedicated steel team in the department that I know will have been working long hours in supporting the Minister on this. Given that the government now owns, controls or funds 3 of the UK's 6 steel companies, whilst maybe a full merger between British Steel and Speciality Steels might be one option, I think at the very least a review of all of the assets under the government's purview would be a good idea to see if we can create more sustainable, investable businesses and reintegrate some of the internal supply chains. Would the Minister consider that?
Minister.
Can I thank my honourable friend for his words, and particularly his thanks to officials in the department who are brilliant, and I work with very closely and have indeed not had many weekends through the whole steel process that we've done under this government. His expertise is very much welcomed on this, and we'll continue, as we did yesterday, to speak about this and to use his expertise. And of course, we need to look at the whole situation. He's right that government is involved in now a large a number of steel industries, although we don't have ownership of any of them. It's a different kind of involvement in different parts of the country. But of course, we are reviewing all of that, and we want to see what the best mix is, and we'll continue to take his advice on that.
So this man.
The government has made direct interventions for steel jobs in Scunthorpe and now in Rotherham. This is no comfort for steel workers in Wales where no similar measures were taken to protect their jobs. Can the Minister explain why her government will save jobs in Yorkshire and Lincolnshire but only help workers in Port Albert to write CVs and search for new jobs?
Minister.
Well, as the Honourable Lady will know, one of the blast furnaces had already closed by the time that we came into government. We had long conversations with Tata on a different model that we had hoped that they would pursue. We were unsuccessful with that. We have now improved the outcomes and the support for that workforce, and I was very pleased in July to be in Port Talbot, to be at the first stage of the build of the electric arc furnace, which will secure many thousands of jobs in Port Talbot, and we will continue to support them with the £500 million that we are investing.
Luke Meyer.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I thank the Minister for her statement and for the decisive action that this government has taken to safeguard steel jobs across the country. Liberty Pipes in our region is at this moment in time delivering an important contract on the government's landmark CCUS project in our region. So can the Minister provide assurance that not only are those jobs in our region unaffected, but also that this project continues apace?
Can I thank my honourable friend for the question? Liberty Pipes is separate, not part of this, situation at all. Of course, there will be concern in the wider group about the impact, and I will understand that and appreciate that. But at the moment, there is no crossover. Liberty Pipes will continue to do what it's doing, and I'm sure will continue to support the CCUS industry, which is great news for the workers there and great news for us.
John Cooper.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And it's good news that Liberty DL in Scotland is not involved in this immediate crisis, but it's not shroud-waving to suggest that the difficulties in the wider industry may mean that it one day does become involved in that. So when the overdue steel strategy does arrive, will it be a 360-degree look at steel production in this country as a whole, in every corner of this country? And will the Minister try and help Scottish colleagues get to the bottom of the murky deal that the Scottish Government did with this company, which means that they're on the hook for potentially as much as £565 million, a quite incredible sum. This is deeply troubling, and the Scottish Government is using the Devolution settlement to hide behind. What is going on there? Will she shine the torch of truth into this aspect of the steel industry?
Minister.
As the honourable gentleman will know, they're separate legal entities in terms of DL, so they're not affected. But of course, he's right to sort of worry about the overall company and the impact that might have. I will look into what he has raised in terms of the Scottish Government and Liberty, but we are having a look across the whole of the UK and what the steel industry should look like. We've got the devolved governments involved in the steel strategy, as well as the unions and the industry and others. So we are taking a holistic view of the whole of the UK to see what we can do with the steel.
Sammy Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Minister is right when she states that the business environment has not been good for the UK steel industry. And the main cause, of course, for that adverse environment has been high energy prices, twice as high as European competitors, 3 times higher than US competitors. But given that the energy sector reminds us on a daily basis that he intends to continue his manic obsession with net zero, which has been the cause of the high energy prices which have caused this environment, how does she hope to attract the private investment which she says is necessary to make the industry bounce back stronger and grow tomorrow?
Well, industrial energy prices doubled under the last government, and the honourable gentleman will know that the impact of the Ukraine war on our energy prices highlighted how we are reliant on the global oil and gas market, and that is why we are pushing for clean energy by 2030 to take us away from that reliance and stop a crisis like that happening again. I should point out that the crisis at Liberty is nothing to do with energy prices. They operate electric arc furnaces. It's not anything to do with carbon pricing or anything that he might be referring to. Where he is right is that energy prices are too high. That's why we're intervening. We will see a very significant reduction in electricity costs when we extend the supercharger from 60 to 90%, which will, as I outlined earlier, in a scenario where speciality steels are producing what they were producing a couple of years ago, it would give them upwards of £1.5 million off their energy costs, which is a lot more than the previous government ever did.
Bradley Thomas.
Madam Deputy Speaker, UK manufacturing has been undervalued for far too long, and one of the best ways that we can support industry is ensuring that their cost base is as low as possible. Will the Minister commit to the House that in 12 months' time UK manufacturers will face lower energy costs than today, and will she rule out further national insurance increases?
Minister.
So UK manufacturing suffered under the previous government that had no strategy, didn't really believe in it, and allowed thousands of jobs to be lost across a range of different industries. This government is taking a fundamentally different approach. We have an industrial strategy where we are intervening directly to grow the industries of the future, including those foundational industries such as steel that are so important to us for many different reasons. We are introducing energy price reductions, which for companies like Liberty, companies that use high levels of energy costs, will mean a significant reduction in their costs by next year. We are also introducing an additional energy reduction for a wider group of up to 7,000 companies that by 2027 will also receive a significant reduction, which again is something that the previous government never did.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I thank the Minister very much for her statement and for her commitment. And anything that I've ever had to speak to the Honourable Lady about, there's always been a willingness to try and achieve something in relation to giving us security for jobs, so I thank her for that personally. The fact that some 1,450 jobs are online is devastating for all of those families, but also to the subsidiary supply companies and those who rely on high quality steel for their manufacturing, including for instance in Northern Ireland, Harland and Wolff, aerospace, the construction sector. There must be certainty for the future of steel to continue to win future contracts for our industries. How can the Minister provide certainty in these very uncertain days? Thank you.
Minister.
Can I thank the Honourable Gentleman for his question and for his kind words at the start. He's right to point to supply chains and the need for us to support not just the key industries but the whole network of medium and smaller companies that exist across the whole of the UK, not just in Northern Ireland. I was in Belfast a couple of weeks ago, was delighted to see Harland and Wolff and the building that is underway there to build the 3 ships that is part of the MOD contract with Navantia. I was pleased to go to Spirit, where we're having good conversations with Boeing about the future of that site and what that could look like. And I met with lots of other parts of the industry where advanced manufacturing in Northern Ireland really is showing the way on lots of new technologies that I think we need to support, and I will continue to support them.
Can I thank the Minister for her statement this afternoon? Before I come to the next statement, can I remind the House and honourable members that they should avoid referring to any cases which are currently active before the courts. Statement, group-based child sexual exploitation and abuse. Minister Jess Phillips.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I would like to update the House on the progress being made to deliver Baroness Casey's recommendations following her national audit on group-based child sexual exploitation and abuse, which was published before the summer recess. The sexual exploitation and abuse of children by grooming gangs are the most horrific and despicable crimes. Girls as young as 10 exploited, abused and brutally raped by gangs of men, and then disgracefully let down again and again by the authorities that were meant to protect them. These despicable crimes have caused the most unimaginable harm to victims and survivors throughout their lives and are a stain on our society. Madam Deputy Speaker, Baroness Casey's report chronicled more than a decade of inaction on these appalling crimes by previous governments, despite repeated warnings and recommendations. But this government will not lose any more time in pursuing truth and justice for victims and survivors, who deserve so much better. That's why, on the 16th of June, the Home Secretary made abundantly clear that this government would accept all of the 12 of Baroness Casey's recommendations, including the establishment of a new statutory national inquiry into group-based child sexual exploitation and a new national policing operation to get more perpetrators behind bars. Since then, we have made significant strides in laying the foundations for a robust, survivor-centred national inquiry and establishing a national policing inquiry, while continuing to drive forward the major work streams that were already well underway to tackle these abhorrent crimes. I will first update the House on the progress made to establish a new national policing operation to get perpetrators who exploit, abuse and harm children behind bars where they belong. Today I can announce that Operation Beaconport has been established. It will be overseen by the National Crime Agency and delivered in partnership with policing, including the National Police Chiefs Council and the CSE Task Force and the Tackling Organised Exploitation Programme. For the very first time, this new national policing operation is bringing together all of the relevant policing partners under one operation to ensure a swift and specialist law enforcement response to grooming gang offending. This collaborative approach is ensuring that long-term investigative capability built across police and best practice is standard, ending an unacceptable postcode lottery for victims and survivors. This new national operation will eliminate inconsistencies on how cases are handled across forces and ensure that there is no hiding place for perpetrators. Victims and survivors are central to this operation, and a trauma-informed practice will be at its core. I have been meeting over the summer with survivors and their support organisations on this issue. This work is already well underway. In January, the Home Secretary asked police forces to identify cases involving grooming and child exploitation that had been closed with no further action, to pursue lines of inquiry and reopen investigations where appropriate. As a result of that commission, 1,273 cases have now been identified for formal review, and with the new national operation has identified 216 highest priority cases that are those involving an allegation of rape, which are being accelerated as a matter of urgency. We expect policing to meticulously pore over these cases and work with associated victims to relentlessly pursue perpetrators who should be behind bars. That includes the ongoing investigation relating to South Yorkshire Police's handling of reports into child sexual abuse and exploitation in Rotherham. Following discussions between the Independent Office for Police Conduct, South Yorkshire Police and the National Crime Agency, I can confirm it has been formally agreed that the investigation will now be carried out by the NCA under the direction and control of the IOPC. Alongside these ongoing reviews, Operation Beaconport will also provide additional support for police forces to conduct complex investigations and to ensure that specialist best practice is being adopted consistently across the country. I want to thank the CSE Task Force for the work they have done in preparing the way forward for these investigations. And I can announce to the House today that in the first year of this government, that we were in office from July 2024 to 2025, the task force contributed 827 arrests nationwide, an 11% increase on the previous year. To bolster this vital work, I also want to update the House that last month I announced that the government will be injecting 426,000 of new funding to the Tackling Organised Exploitation Programme, which is additional to the 8.8 million we are already investing in the programme this year. The new funding will enable TOEX to extend access to a suite of its cutting-edge investigative apps and digital tools stored within its secure capabilities environment to all police forces in England and Wales. In addition to the 15 police forces which are already utilising TOEX tools, following my announcement of a further investment, a future 10 forces are currently onboarding. The TOEX expansion crucially supports the first phase of Operation Beaconport. Police officers will be able to access the AI-enabled tools to assist with detecting and investigating child sexual abuse and exploitation. This includes TOEX Translate, a tool for bulk translation of foreign language text from seized mobile devices, and has enabled savings of an estimated 25 million so far. And the data analysis and review tool, which analyses large amounts of digital data to identify communications patterns and relationships between suspects. Further announcements on Operation Beacon Port will be made by operational partners shortly. A comprehensive update is expected in the coming weeks, setting out the full scope of the operation and the support available to those affected. Madam Deputy Speaker, we will never shy away from the facts in these cases, and so following Baroness Casey's audit, her conclusions on the disproportionate role of Pakistani heritage gangs, and building on the work of the Home Secretary had already commissioned to improve ethnicity data in relation to these crimes, we have also committed to making it a requirement to collect ethnicity and nationality data of suspects who commit child sexual exploitation and abuse offences. The Home Secretary has written to Chief Constables to signal that the current data collection across ethnicity and nationality is unacceptable and that this data must be improved as a matter of urgency. Work is now underway looking to amend the annual data requirement to support this process, and we are also looking at legislative options to drive forward these improvements. Finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, Baroness Casey recommended the establishment of a new statutory national inquiry that could compel targeted investigations in local areas to get to truth and justice for victims and survivors, and to drive meaningful change in local systems and structures that had failed so many people in the past. I can confirm that the national inquiry into group-based child sexual exploitation and abuse will place victims and survivors firmly at its heart. It will crucially ensure trauma-informed, accessible engagement for victims and survivors that reflects diverse lived experiences and minimises the risk of re-traumatisation. The inquiry will examine how effectively local and national safeguarding systems protected children from group-based sexual exploitation and abuse, and hold institutions accountable for past failures. As the Home Secretary said in June, its purpose must be to challenge what Baroness Casey's audit described as continued denial, resistance and legal wrangling amongst local agencies. The inquiry will consider intersections with ethnicity, race and culture, and assess the safeguarding duties of public services, identifying both failures and examples of good practice. I know that everyone in the House and beyond wants to see the inquiry begin its work at the earliest opportunity. Colleagues will know that this requires the appointment of a chair and the agreement of terms of reference. Following a recruitment process over the summer, Home Office officials, the Home Secretary and I have met with prospective candidates for the chair of the inquiry, and we are now in the final stages of that appointment process. Most importantly, the chair must have credibility and experience to command the confidence of victims and survivors as well as the wider public, and meaningful engagement with victims and survivors is paramount. To support this, a dedicated panel of victims and survivors has been established, which will contribute to that chair's selection process. This is a critical milestone, and once an appointment is confirmed, the House will be updated at the earliest opportunity. Members across the House will understand that this process must be done properly and thoroughly, and that we must avoid a repeat of what happened with the efforts to appoint a chair of the original independent inquiry into child sexual abuse, when 3 chairs were appointed and subsequently withdrew from July 2014 onwards, prior to the eventual appointment of Professor Alexis Jay in 2016, a full 2 years after the original chair was named. We are determined to ensure that does not happen again. In line with the Inquiries Act, the appointed chair will play a central role in shaping the Commission's terms of reference. These will be published and subject to consultation with stakeholders, including victims and survivors. The inquiry is expected to run for 2 to 3 years, enabling it to examine a broad range of issues while honouring Baroness Casey's recommendation that it must be time limited to deliver answers swiftly, which has been a key request not just from victims and survivors, but also members across the House. The inquiry will begin identifying priority areas for review, conducting targeted local investigations, and reporting findings at both local and national levels. These reviews will be tailored to the specific context of each area and may involve a wide range of organisations, including children and family services, police, the CPS, and health and education providers, youth services, third sector organisations, and central government departments whose actions and decisions have affected what has happened at a local level. Where appropriate, the inquiry will issue recommendations at both a local and national level, and we will keep the House informed of all appointments and the terms of reference, as with the victims and publics, as soon as possible. The Government remains unwavering in its commitment to ensure that this inquiry is robust, transparent and capable of delivering truth, accountability and meaningful change. As we have said from the outset, we are determined to ensure that every survivor of grooming gangs gets the support and justice they deserve, that every perpetrator is put behind bars, and that every case, historic or current, has been properly investigated, and that every person or institution who looked the other way is held accountable, as that is a stain on our society and it should finally be removed for good. I commend this statement to the House.
Before I call the Shadow Home Secretary, given that the Minister's just taken 12 minutes, I will be extending the time allowed to both Shadows to 6 and 3. Chris Philp.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Minister for advance sight of her statement. Let us remember that victims are at the heart of this. Young girls, some only 10 years old, were groomed and gang raped by men of predominantly Pakistani origin. Girls like Jane, just 12 years old, when she was raped by an illegal immigrant, when she was found by police, instead of arresting the rapist, the police arrested Jane. Or Anna, only 15 years old, who repeatedly told social workers that she had been gang raped. Instead of helping her, they allowed her to marry her main abuser in an Islamic ceremony. The social worker even attended the ceremony. The ringleader of the Rochdale rape gang, Shabir Ahmed, was actually employed as a welfare rights officer by Oldham Council. In another case, a man tried to rescue his young daughter from being raped, but instead of protecting her, the police arrested her dad. I spoke to a mother whose daughter was raped by taxi drivers of Pakistani origin. When she complained to social services, they said that if she dared to raise the matter again, she would lose her daughter. And I spoke to a retired police officer who was himself told by a senior officer at the time to stop investigating abuse by Pakistani origin taxi drivers in Bradford because the police locally did not want to offend Bradford's Muslim community. A former Labour MP, Simon Danchuk, was even told by senior Labour Party figures to stop asking questions in his constituency to avoid antagonising the Muslim community. So these crimes were deliberately covered up by people in authority because so-called community relations were seen as more important than protecting young girls. Madam Deputy Speaker, this is a disgrace. Now, the Minister claimed in her statement a moment ago that nothing had been done about this previously, and I don't want to dwell on this, but I will gently remind her that it was the last government that set up the original Rotherham inquiry in 2014, set up the long-running ICSA inquiry, which was much broader but did touch on this, started to collect data on the ethnicity of suspects, set up Operation Soteria to combat sex crimes, and I attended many meetings on that, set up the grooming gang task force that led to 550 arrests in its first year, I'm glad that's continuing, and introduced legislation to require mandatory reporting, and again I'm glad the government is continuing that work. It is clear, however, that much more is needed. But this government has had to be dragged kicking and screaming every step of the way. When the government's rejection of Oldham's call for a national inquiry became public on January the 6th, the Prime Minister disgracefully smeared as, quotes, far right those supporting calls for that proper inquiry. That kind of language is how these crimes got covered up in the first place. Now, 10 days later, the government partially U-turned and announced local inquiries. And then, on the 16th of June, faced with a parliamentary vote 2 days later, the government finally announced a statutory national inquiry. Not because they chose to, not because they wanted to, but because they were forced to. What the Prime Minister claimed was a far-right bandwagon in January had become government policy by June. And here we are, Madam Deputy Speaker, 3 months later. Almost no progress has been made. My office has been in contact with survivors in Oldham today, and they have heard nothing. Now we discover no chair has been appointed, there are no terms of reference, there is no news on towns like Oldham or Bradford, nothing of substance at all. This is just not good enough. So will the Minister tell the House precisely when a chair will be appointed and when we will have terms of reference, a precise date? Will this inquiry have full statutory powers under the 2005 Act? Will she confirm all 50 towns affected will be covered? Will she confirm that no police force or council will be able to investigate themselves? And will she confirm, perhaps most importantly, that this inquiry will look at those in authority, police, CPS, local councils, who deliberately covered this up because those people were more interested in appeasing certain minority communities than they were in protecting young girls? And finally, does she agree with me that those individuals responsible for deliberately covering this up should be prosecuted for misconduct in public office, and if they are convicted, sent to jail?
Minister.
I thank partially the Shadow Home Secretary for his tone. I'd just like to correct the record. I didn't say that he had done nothing. What I said, that Baroness Casey had said that there had been a decade of inaction of these appalling crimes by previous governments, was exactly what I said. I also answered in my statement many of the questions that he has asked. What I will not do, and his office may have spoken to some of the Oldham victims today. I spoke to some of them personally last night, and so I keep in touch with lots of victims. And what I will not do, what I will never do, is make it so that they are not involved. And it takes time to make sure that this process is completely victim-centred. And I will, frankly, what I will say to him, and I am sure that this is what he and others on his side have written to me about requesting, will want to see that too. And that is the process that we are undertaking. In answer to his question, no local authority area can turn it down. I have said, and the Home Secretary has said a number of times, it is a full, powerful statutory inquiry. And I have to say, I have seen some scaremongering, and victims have written to me to say, oh, this won't cover government officials, it won't cover people who covered things up. Absolute nonsense. Let me say and be very clear, and it be taken away by everybody who I'm sure has the victim's best interests at heart, that it will cover what it needs to cover to uncover the truth. And no stone will be left unturned. And that will make difficult conversations for people. And if people are found by our court system to have undermined and had disgrace in public office, then of course they should be sent to prison. However, that has never happened to date in these cases. And so, of course, I very much hope that we uncover the kind of social workers that he referred to, and I hope that they face the full force of everything that they deserve to face. But there is absolutely nothing that says that anybody can avoid this. It will be up to the inquiry, which is independent and statutory, to look and work with areas about where this will be.
Debbie Abraham.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I thank my honourable friend for her statement. No one doubts her absolute commitment and her team's commitment to address the root causes of the abuse and exploitation that so many women and some boys as well have experienced. In my contact with women this morning, they're absolutely, I'm speaking on their behalf, absolutely committed and understand and reflect that commitment of my honourable friend. But they are keen to know a bit more detail about when the chair can be appointment, the relationship that the national inquiry will have with the local ones. You quite rightly said that the appointment of the chair should have victims and survivors engaged and involved in that, which is so important. But can you say a little, can my honourable friend say more about how we're going to ensure there's locality-specific representation as well, because there are slight differences according to locality. Thank you.
Minister.
There absolutely are, and the honourable lady is, my honourable friend is exactly right, there is different, and so it will be for the chair and a panel and a commission to be doing that work in localities and ensuring that that victim engagement is really location specific. With regard to the specific issue of Oldham, obviously we have been engaging very closely with Oldham for some time, including obviously with victims and survivors. I was speaking to some, as I say, last night about wanting them to be part of the terms of reference for the national inquiry, and our offer for a full local independent inquiry in Oldham remains in place, and we are in discussion with them about how they want to proceed in context of the national. What we don't want to do is have victims having to do a repetitive exercise, actually, but I can assure her that we are speaking to officials in Oldham very regularly.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Lisa Smart.
Very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'm grateful, as I always am, to the Minister for advance sight of her statement. In every single conversation about this issue in this House, our first thought must always be with the victims and the survivors. No child should ever suffer the devastating trauma of sexual exploitation or abuse. These crimes are abhorrent and an assault on the very values of our society. We carry a responsibility to act, to secure justice for victims, to ensure offenders answer for their crimes, and to build a future where such suffering is not repeated. In 2022, Professor Alexis Jay published her independent inquiry into child sexual abuse. And in June, Baroness Casey released her report on group-based exploitation. I am really grateful to the Minister for her update on progress that's being made, but would like to ask when she expects to have implemented the crucial recommendations from both reports. Baroness Casey was clear in one of her key recommendations. The government must end the practice of out-of-area taxis by introducing stronger national standards for taxi licensing and driver regulation. Across Greater Manchester, we know this problem all too well, and for years drivers have exploited the fragmented system by obtaining the easiest licences from councils in one area and then operating elsewhere. As a result, many taxis working in Greater Manchester are licensed 100 miles away in Wolverhampton. Could the Minister let us know about the work she's doing to address this specific issue? It feels like there's an opportunity this afternoon, Madam Deputy Speaker, through the English Devolution and Community Empowerment Bill, but the opportunity has not yet been taken. Will the Minister work with colleagues across the House, if an amendment to the bill is the way to achieve this, to ensure that this important recommendation from Baroness Casey can be delivered? And finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, this is something I and others have raised repeatedly, and on which some progress was hinted at in recent press reports. Could the Minister confirm when Parliament will see legislation for a Hillsborough law, as promised many times by the Government, to guarantee that public officials and authorities cooperate fully with a duty of candour in cases such as this, including the upcoming national inquiry?
I thank the Honourable Lady, and to pick up on some of the things that she asked, really specifically on, and I am meeting with the Department for Transport on this very, very issue last week, and it is about just looking for a legislative vehicle. The Government has said that it will undo some, I have to say, the harm done by the deregulation legislation of the past with regard to the dangers that have come about in safeguarding and taxi licensing, and it is a legislative vehicle, and she invited members to work across the House. And what I would say in every interaction since the last time I stood here, or the Home Secretary stood here doing a statement, in every interaction I've had with victims of this crime, which has been many, many in that time, what they asked is, could we just please work together and stop throwing mud at each other? So I stand here and say I will happily work with anyone on this issue. Looking for legislative vehicles is currently where we are, but we will do seek to legislate. And again, sorry that this is not a very prescriptive answer, but shortly is when we will be expecting the Hillsborough law, but it is very much expected.
Charlotte Nichols.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The last government failed to implement a single recommendation from the ICSA report, and Professor Alexis Jay herself spoke of the huge anger and disappointment at their response. While Baroness Casey's work rightly focuses on the future, and I'm grateful for the statement today, can the Minister please reassure me that the extraordinary work of Professor Jay and all of the brave victims and survivors who contributed will not be forgotten, and that the government will implement the ICSA recommendations in full, including its recommendations on the Criminal Injuries Compensation Scheme, which currently excludes far too many victims of group-based child sexual exploitation and leaves them without the adequate support to rebuild their lives.
I thank the Honourable Lady and praise her long-term commitment in this space. The government has given a number of updates on ICSA, and actually I very much expect to be coming back to this House soon with one way or another with further updates on progress in that. Much of the progress that we are seeking to make is around bills that are currently passing through and are over in the other place currently. But I think she makes a very important point that we must not undermine the frankly 2-year piece of work that was already being done by by Professor Jay on this issue, and we will make sure that any of those findings, recommendations, which Casey included as well, and also anything sent to us on intelligence feeds into the new National Independent Inquiry.
Robbie Moore.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Over the summer, Lord Cryer said that there was a deliberate attempt to silence his mother, Anne Cryer, when she first bravely raised the issue of grooming gangs in Keighley more than 20 years ago. Anne Cryer was, of course, my predecessor in being the Member of Parliament for Keighley. He said he was, and I quote, absolutely certain there has been a cover-up at a local level and that Bradford needs to be examined as part of this inquiry. Unfortunately, Bradford Council and others in this House are still saying that they will only support a focus on Bradford if deemed necessary by the inquiry chair. That is not the same thing, Madam Deputy Speaker, as saying that they will actively be lobbying for this outcome. So does the Minister share my concern that Bradford Council's reluctance for an inquiry in our area hasn't changed, despite the many voices of so many victims and others demanding one?
Minister.
I thank the honourable gentleman, and I pay absolute tribute to Anne Cryer, a woman I am incredibly fond of personally as well as professionally, for her immense bravery. And I absolutely have no doubt that none of us would be sitting here talking about any of this today had it not been for her. And so she deserves absolute credit. I have to say I do not recognise the characterisation that he is making. I have not had any particular pushback or anywhere suggesting that the inquiry shouldn't be looking into certain areas or making any sense that they will be resistant of it. But what I would say to all local areas is resistance is futile.
Paul Wall.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I welcome today's update on the National Inquiry into Grooming Gangs, particularly the way that the Minister has made sure that victims and survivors are definitely going to be at the heart of whatever happens. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, during the trial earlier this year of 7 members of a Rochdale grooming gang, it emerged in court that actually the social workers involved had referred to one of those victims as a prostitute. She was 13 at the time. There were other victims who were 10 at the time who were also called prostitutes. I know the Minister will agree with me that the criminalisation of young girls as prostitutes causes them further trauma later in life. These girls were victims and the state should recognise them as that. So can I ask her what steps she'll take to ensure that such convictions for prostitution are disregarded as swiftly as possible?
I thank the honourable gentleman, and often in this debate we discuss how people felt nervous or anxious about the ethnicity, when actually what is also very evident in every single case, regardless of the ethnicity of the perpetrators, is the ability of agencies to look at women and think of them as something else, young girls, and think of them as poor, and to treat them poorly, and that is exactly what he is talking about. We will legislate to introduce, we are already in the Crime and Policing Bill, which is going through, going to disregard any child prostitution convictions, and we are working with the Ministry of Justice to find a wider cohort of victims and work with CJS bodies to identify and review cases and support victims it won't always have been just prostitution charges. And in meeting with victims, I've met many who've been criminalised by a variety of things that they probably shouldn't have. And so that will be a much more complicated process, but one that we set in train.
Mark Pritchard.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm glad the Minister, and I hope the whole House will join the Minister in wanting to put victims and survivors first. It's absolutely right that we all do that. She'll be aware of the Tom Crowther inquiry that highlighted 1,000 victims over 30 years in Telford and in some parts of my constituency. As she earlier said to the House, we don't want victims to have to undergo, quote, a repetitive exercise, and I understand why she says that. However, would she support the national inquiry going back to Telford to ensure that things that still have not been done that should have been done will be done, and she'll ensure that the Labour Council there, forgive me, in Telford Region, will not stand in the way of that progress?
Minister.
I thank the honourable gentleman, and just to say, on the contrary, there is very few people who have written to me more than the leader of Telford Council throughout this process to talk about how they want to continue to make progress. What I would say is that I am very familiar with what happened in Telford, and quite a lot of the evidence from Telford shows how people in Telford were groomed where I live in Birmingham, and yet, whilst brilliant, the Telford inquiry then didn't lead to any changes in neighbouring areas, and that is exactly what we will hope that the National Inquiry will do. So whilst I cannot direct where it must go, I would absolutely be wanting them to look at prior work that has been done and some of the gaps identified, just exactly as he says.
Clive Efford.
Deputy Speaker, I welcome my honourable friend's statement today. This is yet another example of where the state turned its back on working class people, in this case, young children, young girls. I welcome also the fact that the cold cases are going to be investigated, and that those cases will be reopened if there's any evidence of criminal activity. But we've seen in the past that when the police have been undertaking investigation and then there's an inquiry announced, that they suspend their investigations until the outcome of that inquiry. Can she give us an assurance that that won't happen in this case?
Minister. Yes, the honourable gentleman makes a very important point that we have to make sure that the inquiry isn't used for further state inactivity, and there have been cases of those things that have happened before. Because we are undertaking a new national policing operation in Operation Beaconport at the same time as the national inquiry, what I will give him today is my absolute assurances that I will make sure that those are working closely together so that that cannot happen unless it is something that would cause such judicial issues that it would have to.
Liz Saville-Roberts.
And I truly thank the Minister for putting vulnerable girls first and central in her statement. And as we all know, victims of sexual abuse are too often disbelieved by the authorities, whatever the circumstances, and speaking out takes immense courage, and people pay an immense cost only too often. So while welcoming her announcements regarding the national inquiry, can she assure me that the government's delayed violence against women and girls strategy will clarify how victims will be supported to rebuild their lives? And could she please say when it will be published?
The violence against women and girls strategy, and there has been some reporting that it would not include child abuse victims and grooming gang victims, which I'd like to stand here and say is utter rubbish, and it absolutely will, and it will be published very shortly. But I would say to the honourable lady that any delay is only out of my own perfectionism, I think is probably what I'm going to call it, in that this is something that will last at least to the next Parliament and is a 10-year strategy and has to be right, but it will absolutely have huge parts of it that are about the support for victims.
Andrew Peggs.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank my right honourable friend for her statement, but also the care and determination she's brought to this role, not just to centre this discussion and action around the victims and young girls, but also to work in collaboration with others, not just in this House, but who are directly affected. Can I just add a question to echo points made by another honourable friend around loopholes in taxi licensing? One of the biggest issues that comes up in my constituency, both from taxi users and women's groups, but also from the vast majority of decent, hard-working taxi drivers, is that these loopholes and the ineffectiveness and outdated nature of taxi licensing actually gives a bad name to the system as a whole. Can I urge her to work with her colleagues and ensure, as we proceed with the national inquiry, we also proceed with this updating of legislation to give protection to all?
Absolutely. Long before Baroness Casey was pointing out the safeguarding issues, I was being lobbied by really decent, hard-working people around the failures of the taxi licensing system as it currently stands. And we absolutely will consider all options. And as I've said, we have committed to legislating really specifically on this point. But we are looking also at including out-of-area working, national standards and enforcement, and consulting on making local transport authorities responsible for the licensing.
Esther McVeigh.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, what a disappointment. I came here to the House today to listen to the Minister's statement in the hope that we would get some detailed information about the government's statutory inquiry. And what have we had today? A long statement and very little information indeed. In fact, I would go as far as to say what this government is doing about this rape gang inquiry is a masterclass in procrastination. And what did we hear from the Prime Minister? It was a right-wing bandwagon. What did we hear from senior ministers? It was a wolf whistle issue. Well, what we want to know are the terms of reference, and where will they be put on the government's website so we can all inspect them? And when will this conclude? Or does the Minister hope that it will go on and on and on past the next general election?
Not sure that the Honourable Lady wants to hear my hopes about the next general election. I think, as I said earlier, the victims of this crime have sat in front of me with tears in their eyes and said they hate it when we shout at each other about these things and they wish we would work together. So just to tell her again the details of what I outlined was that 1,273 cases have now been identified by the new policing investigation, which was actually recommendation 1 of Baroness Casey. And of those, we are expediting 216 cases. So, and what I will tell her about the terms of reference is that they will be published and consulted on. And I have to say, I would very much welcome her opinion, and she's never asked for a meeting with me, and I'd love to have one if she'd like to be involved in how we build those up. Please get in touch with my office. But what I would say is that I have to say, hers is not the voice I'm most concerned about sharing them with, and those people I'm speaking to.
Chris Murray.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. One of the most shocking indictments in Baroness Casey's evidence at the Home Affairs Committee was the long list of inquiries and speeches and the shocking lack of action that had followed from them. So I welcome this announcements the Home Secretary's made in her statement about action on tackling these issues. And can I ask what about something in particular? Can she update us on the establishment of the Child Protection Agency, how that will be set up as this inquiry goes on, and how it will adjust and evolve as learnings from the inquiry have come out?
I thank the honourable gentleman, and he is absolutely right, because Baroness Casey pointed out how much of her recommendations hinge on there being a good child protection authority, and that work is being done by Department for Education colleagues. I have been involved in it along with Alexis J, ensuring that she has been in meetings with them. But what it will do is evolve. Because what we don't want to do is wait forever to set it up, contrary to the views of some people in this House, and then or try and get it exactly right first time when it is a complicated thing. So it will evolve along the way, but all of those involved in the inquiry, I'm sure, will have, across both local and national bodies, will have the opportunity to feed into what that needs to look like.
Richard Ford.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'm wholly supportive of this government-commissioned report into group-based child sexual exploitation. But the government must not be distracted from places where child sexual abuse occurs most frequently. The NSPCC reports that 90% of young people who have been sexually abused said the perpetrator was someone they knew. Around a third is perpetrated by young people under the age of 18. And the NSPCC says that in relation to sibling sexual abuse, that, quote, the number of children affected by this hidden harm is far greater than is acknowledged by policy makers. Is the Minister certain that the government will not be distracted from abuse within schools and within families?
I absolutely praise the honourable gentleman for saying what he has said, because quite a lot of victims of familial abuse, or in fact child exploitation, not by groups, but child exploitation by families, which I'm afraid to say is not uncommon, or by peer groups is not uncommon, and I know that from my years of experience, feel as if their voices are being marginalised. What I would say is that this piece of work, the work that we have announced today, sits as part of a much broader child abuse body that sits within the Home Office and works on all of those things. The ICSA recommendations keep us on that track, but we must not lose sight of all of the abuse, especially that happening amongst young people, against other young people, and online.
Katrina Murray.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Minister for her statement today, and also the recognition that a process which is supported by those people who should be at the very heart of it is always a difficult one to do, and for any inquiry to have the faith of the people who are at the centre is something we try and take time to get right, because that will never be able to be done again, because they have been failed too often. We have discussed before how child abuse and exploitation does not stop at Gretna, and I would just like the Minister to outline what engagement there has been with the devolved administrations as to how we can make this a truly national inquiry.
Minister.
I thank the honourable lady, and she is absolutely right. There is likely to be border crossing, as I spoke about, between Birmingham and Telford, which is a border in their inquiry. We continue to discuss this with the devolved administration. However, the Scottish Government can set up, under the Inquiries Act, as we have, a specific national inquiry, but where there are any findings with regard to cross-border, that those of course will be shared and actions sought and potentially recommendations made.
Sir Julian Smith.
At the start of the summer, there were some horrendous reports about the rapes and assaults that are taking place by South Yorkshire Police. I welcome the decision to involve the NCA and strip away responsibility for those investigations from the force. But would she confirm that the national inquiry will look at the role of the police, not only in cover-ups, but in the crimes themselves?
Minister.
Absolutely, yeah. The South Yorkshire Police should never have been left to investigate themselves in this matter, and so yes, moving over to the NCA is the absolutely right thing to do. But I would be lying if I said that over the years I have not met girls who talk to me about how police were part of the perpetration, not just the cover-up. And we need to make sure that victims can come and give that testimony. That testimony is harder to give than others because it brings fear and a lack of trust, but absolutely that will that will, if that is where the inquiry takes us, because that's what victims say, then absolutely that will be the case.
Before I call the next speaker on the government side, I just wanted to make it clear I'll be going to Steve Darling after that. Catherine Atkinson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The crime of group-based child sexual exploitation is probably the most heinous imaginable. And it is so brave for victims to speak out and seek justice and drive change so that other young lives are protected from crimes like these. Can the Minister tell us more about how the National Inquiry will engage with victims and survivors and make sure that their voices and those who previously bravely contributed to investigations and inquiries are central to the recommendations? And unlike the criminal law, the criminal injuries compensation scheme does not recognise that children cannot legally consent and excludes those who have been deemed to consent in fact from compensation. So will she work with the Victims Minister to right that injustice?
I thank the Honourable Lady, and I absolutely commit to working with the Victims Minister. And the issue of consent, actually, and the age of consent was a huge part of Baroness Casey's review. And a number of honourable members have mentioned like making this a victim-centred thing. That is words that we say. It is much, much harder in reality. These are people who have been very badly wronged, and their level of trust. It is not something that happens easily. It's not something where every one of the victims will get on with each other. And making sure that there are systems in both the National Policing Inquiry and also the National Statutory Inquiry to make sure that as many voices can be heard as comfortably as possible is absolutely what we will do. But I don't think we should lie to the public about how easy those things are. As somebody who has worked in this field for a very, very long time, we are talking about very traumatised and distrusting people, and it is going to take considerably more effort and patience than I think they've been shown in the past.
Steve Darling.
Thank you. Grooming gangs are absolutely abhorrent, as are all forms of grooming leading to sexual exploitation. This summer, I met with a Torbay resident whose 15-year-old adopted son had been groomed online and then prostituted online. Can the Minister please advise us how she is looking to tackle all forms of grooming that lead to sexual exploitation? Thank you.
I thank the honourable gentleman, and also my honourable friend from Oldham also mentioned this, and the importance to highlight that boys, especially in the online crime of sexploitation, are very, very actually at greater risk. It is the only area of in sexploitation where the majority of victims are actually teenage boys, and this is a new and growing phenomenon. But what I will say to him is that both in the National Inquiry and Operation Beaconport, what I and the Home Secretary have been pushing for at every stage is this cannot just rake over historic coals. It has to be grounded in the way that abuse is happening now and improving police forces' responses to that. And that undoubtedly now is happening online. The most frightening statistic that keeps me awake at night is that of child sexual abuse perpetrated last year, 53% of it was perpetrated by somebody aged 10 to 17.
Barry Gardner.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. First of all, can I pay tribute to my honourable friend for what has been her lifetime's work protecting women and girls. I welcome her statement about updating the ethnicity data. This will enable the public debate to take place on the basis of data and fact rather than prejudice and scaremongering that she spoke of. But does she think it might also help to engender trust in the debate if she were to take this opportunity to acknowledge that there was a completely unacceptable woke reluctance to offend certain communities, and this culture of deference, where it still persists, must be stamped out?
I absolutely take the opportunity and thank the honourable gentleman for his kind words. I absolutely take the opportunity because I've seen it with my own eyes in cases that I have been involved in where people have said, oh, it might cause trouble. And that wasn't stopping them from doing it, but even mentioning that to me, which they wouldn't do in other circumstances. So what we have to do and what we all owe to the victims of these crimes is to call it what it is, but also not use our own political agendas over their very, very delicate and harmed lives in whatever form that is, because what we don't want is backlash now leading to police still feeling like, oh gosh, this is going to open a can of worms. We have to all act completely responsibly on these issues. But I've definitely seen it, and it should never have been allowed to happen.
John Lamont.
Thank you very much. I recently met with Dr. Joanna Kerr, an extremely brave survivor of child sexual exploitation and abuse in Scotland. But as it stands, the national inquiry won't cover Scotland and the SNP government won't launch their own. So I ask the Minister again, will she commit to extend the national inquiry to include Scotland and all parts of the United Kingdom? Or do victims like Joanna don't deserve justice?
Minister.
It's absolutely not that victims like Joanna don't deserve justice. They absolutely do deserve justice, and I don't know her case, and I'm more than happy to meet with Joanna and talk to her about her case. It is that the body who has to have a national inquiry into Scotland is that of the devolved government. It is both policing and child protection are devolved issues. However, as I've said to my honourable friend, on this side of the House, I am more than happy to look at, and certainly where people have been abused in Scotland, who are Scottish or live in Scotland now and have been abused, where the inquiry covers, they will absolutely be able to take part in that.
Lawrence Turner.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. One of the questions that haunts Baroness Casey's audit is why? Why was this type of offending allowed to grow seemingly unchecked for so long? So will the Minister, who it is good to see in her place, give an assurance that serious and credible research will be commissioned and operate without fear or favour into all the factors that drove and enabled the horrendous crime of gang-based child sexual exploitation?
Absolutely. One of the recommendations that Baroness Casey recommended was a piece of research into exactly that, the why things got covered up, the why on communities but also institutions, and the Home Office is currently working with various academics to commission that particular piece of research. But that is the fundamental, and whilst a huge amount, and as I've said I agree with it, has been about the ethnicity on the why issue, the nervousness, the wokeness, whatever you want to call it. One of the real whys is also about class and these young women and the way that they are treated by systems when they come forward, and frankly how lots of women get treated when they come forward about any of these issues.
Sammy Wilson.
Speaker, it's a pity that the government has had to be dragged screaming into granting this inquiry into Pakistani rape and grooming gangs. But the inquiry is welcome. However, given the fact that nobody has been appointed yet, terms of reference have not been determined, and we don't even know how long the inquiry is going to take, I'm sure the Minister will understand why victims will be looking to see what can be done immediately to address the concerns they have. And could I ask the Minister, for those cases that have been identified, where officials, police officials, social workers, council officials have been identified as covering up, can we be assured that their cases will go ahead of any inquiry? And for those who have been put in jail, can we ensure that they serve out their sentences and not like the Oxford 6 who released early despite the recommendations?
The honourable gentleman, I did actually say in my statement that, like as it outlines in Baroness Casey's review, that it should take around 2 to 3 years. It should be time sensitive. And look, all I can say to the honourable gentleman is that to make sure that we are doing this right, I have said we will shortly update on the chair, and I would gently remind him of the 2 years it took to find a chair of the Child Sex Abuse Inquiry. 2 years and 3 failed attempts. I do not want to do that to people this time, and so that is why we are taking the time.
Tamanjeet Singh Desi.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. We all want to see an end to grooming gangs and justice for victims and survivors, because exploiting the most vulnerable is about as despicable and heinous as it gets. We all know that perpetrators come from different backgrounds and communities, but certain politically motivated individuals are trying to blame just particular communities, and that is why they try to gloss over that fact in their effort to sow division and discord. We certainly can't be politically correct about this either, because no one, regardless of race or religion, is above the law. But we cannot allow such an important issue to be treated like a sectarian political football for those who seek to sow that division. So can my right honourable friend, the Minister, outline what the government will be doing to root out this evil with this second national inquiry, and how this will remain focused on victims and survivors, and how will she ensure that this debate is conducted in a sensible, sensitive manner?
I can only, what I can say is that I stand here as a vessel of those, as I have said, the victims who've spoken to me, who in his words, that they haven't necessarily used the word sectarian, but that they hate this being used as a political football. Baroness Casey, in the media that she did post releasing her report, said the same, that she felt that politics was not meeting the moment in some of the responses. We have got to do better, and the very first thing that I would say is that I welcome the involvement and I look forward to the engagement around the terms of reference, which will be published for consultation with every single member of this House, regardless of what they might have said before or what we might have fallen out on other occasions. I welcome it, and I want to make sure that we show the very, very best of this place, because that is the least they deserve.
Bob Blackman.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Minister will be well aware that many of the victims of this disgraceful, despicable type of activity were originally taken from broken homes, taken to the care of a local authority, and then groomed ruthlessly. Social workers turned a blind eye, managers told social workers to turn a blind eye, the police in many ways were complicit. One of the problems is that whistleblowers, of course, that came forward to tell the stories about this were all sacked. So what action will the Minister take to ensure that the victims are protected, but the whistleblowers that come forward and tell the truth of what was going on are similarly protected as part of this inquiry?
I absolutely agree with him. Not a man I've fallen out with before, but I absolutely agree with him, and making sure, in fact, I heard from some whistleblowers this week around how some of their testimony was not then published in the ICSA inquiry. So we have to really look at, when dealing with the terms of reference, the very robust safeguards on whistleblowers. I have worked with one of the whistleblowers who lost her job, Sarah Robotham, in Rochdale, and I have met with her and her Member of Parliament to talk about exactly some of that and how we need to, not just in the inquiry or in Operation Beacon Port, just try and get this right in the future.
Charlie Dewhurst.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. On the 6th of August, the Minister described certain councils who do not believe they have a problem with grooming gangs as idiots. Can she therefore explain if this also applies to the government, given the enormous pressure it took for them to implement this inquiry and the disparaging comments previously made by the Prime Minister?
It would be playing a very long game to say that I'd been taken kicking or screaming into this issue, because on Sarah Rowbotham, one of the whistleblowers, I wrote a book about her about 9 years ago and this particular issue, and set up many support services for victims of these crimes. What I will stand here and say is that I will always do what I think is best in these cases. And I took the advice of Baroness Casey, and I think that trying to see bad faith in it or score political points on it is not what we should do.
Iqbal Mohammed.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I would like to pay tribute to the Minister for the work and thank her for her statement. Madam Deputy Speaker, this crime is absolutely abhorrent. Every single victim and survivor of this crime must get justice, no matter who the perpetrator, Pakistani, Indian, English or anyone. So please, can we dial down the politicisation and the inflammatory rhetoric in this place and show total compassion and empathy when we work together to tackle this scourge in our country for every single victim. And finally, may I ask the Minister for a meeting with me and my colleagues so we can learn how we can support the work of the government in this space.
Of course, I will meet with the honourable gentleman and like I say, any colleagues who wish to take part in this work. As somebody who represents a large and diverse community myself, I have to say that it would be the Pakistani part of my community who have been most fervent in wanting the truth to come out, because there is harm to them that has been done by the the alleged wokeness that has been talked about. And I take this opportunity as well as I finish this statement to say that we not just have to make sure that we have the facts and not feel squeamish about the perpetrators, but I want to say that I have met victims of this crime, in fact, on 6 a.m. on Monday morning, victims of this crime who are black, white, Asian, and we mustn't be silencing those victims by only ever talking about one type of victim. The victimhood in group-based abuse is not just one type. Apart from one thing, they were all girls.
I thank the Minister for her statement this afternoon. Presentation of Bill. Minister.
Sentencing Bill.
Second reading, what day? Tomorrow. Presentation of Bill. Dr. Al Pinkerton.
No, not tomorrow.
Vehicle Registration Marks, Misuse and Offences Bill.
Second reading, what day?
12th of September.
12th of September. Which brings us to the 10-minute rule motion. Becky Gittins.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill to make provision for a review of allergy guidance relating to the feeding and weaning of babies and infants and for connected purposes. For new parents, having a child, I'm told, is one of the most amazing and fulfilling times of their life. Madam Deputy Speaker, I hope to be able to report back to the House on the validity of that claim later in the year. However, it can also be a period of huge anxiety. Parents are reliant upon our brilliant NHS through pregnancy and those important first few months of a child's life. They will be inundated with information, either via medical professionals, peers, support groups, or the internet. And of course, they will make the best decision they can based on the information that they have. This is personal to me. As a long-time allergy sufferer expecting my first child, I've been actively seeking out information on how I can best mitigate against my child growing up with some of the food allergies that I have. And I'm not alone. Rates of allergic disease such as asthma, hay fever and food allergies have been increasing. The UK has some of the highest rates of allergic conditions in the world, affecting over 1/4 of the population. It's one of the most common chronic diseases in childhood. In terms of interaction with the NHS, around 6% of all visits to the GP are due to allergies, and medicines to treat allergic diseases account for 10% of the total GP prescribing budget. The direct cost to the NHS for managing allergic diseases is over £1 billion per annum, and in reality, the cost is likely to be much higher. The cost to the individual allergy sufferers and their families is greater still, with huge impacts on their lives, which many of us know all too well. Increased anxiety, social isolation, and limited opportunities for things like travel and other experiences, because the health risks are far too high and the allergy awareness far too low. When it comes to food allergies, we know that on average, 2 children in every classroom are affected, and food allergy in the UK has doubled between 2008 and 2018. So the scale of the problem is huge, as allergies impact every classroom and every GP surgery in the UK. Having spoken to some of the most noted allergy specialists in the country ahead of today, it's clear to me that the current food allergy guidance for the feeding and weaning of babies and infants should be reviewed with a particular focus on those children that are showing early signs of allergic disease. Better addressing allergy at primary care level is a relatively simple but hugely effective way of moving the allergy conversation towards prevention. The government's new 10-year plan for the NHS rightly demands that focus on prevention. Prevention in allergy is about recognising that the key principles that preventing severe conditions from developing, rather than purely focusing on the treatment of those severe conditions, is better both for the patients and the financial sustainability of our NHS. Rather than long waits to see allergy specialists and the hope of medical trials once a child has already developed an allergy, which have huge waiting lists and are sadly not effective for everyone, improving our approach to allergy in our public health advice and primary care can be the key to preventing children from developing allergies in the first place. And the guidance should be reviewed for a number of reasons: to improve the clarity and consistency of message, to increase awareness, to help empower healthcare professionals, and to ensure that ethnic minorities are not being put at a disadvantage. However, before I go into detail as to why the evidence suggests we need this review, I want to be really clear about what this bill is not. The current NHS guidance is that exclusive breastfeeding is recommended for about the first 6 months of the baby's life, and continuing it into the baby's second year or beyond alongside other foods is best for their development. This bill does not contradict that advice. The bill is not about changing the advice to the majority of parents, only to those who are beginning to show signs of allergy development, which is those children with severe eczema and those already showing signs of food allergy. Additionally, any suggestion of early weaning for this cohort of children is to be done alongside breastfeeding, with no suggestions in the studies that I cite to support this bill that breastfeeding rates are impacted by altering public health advice to better prevent allergy. When it comes to introducing foods that could trigger allergies, NHS guidance shows that delaying the introduction of peanut and eggs beyond 6 to 12 months may increase the risk of developing an allergy to these foods. The report this advice is based on is almost 10 years old. In response, other countries around the world have taken a more aggressive approach to allergy prevention over the past decade, and we in the UK need to learn and adapt based on the outcomes of these different approaches. However, when we look at the medical guidance and evidence from other parts of the world, including the US and some areas in Europe, it actually goes further and encourages the early introduction of these allergens. This is particularly the case for children who are displaying allergies early on. The Learning Early About Peanut Allergy, or LEAP study, looked at the introduction of peanut into the diet of infants aged between 4 and 11 months at high risk of peanut allergy. High-risk infants were defined as those with the presence of significant eczema and/or a pre-existing egg allergy. Published 10 years ago now, the study demonstrated that the consumption of a peanut-containing snack by infants who are at high risk for developing a peanut allergy prevents the subsequent development of the allergy. Of the children who avoided peanut, 17% developed a peanut allergy by the age of 5 years. However, only 3% of the children who were randomised to eating the peanut snack developed the allergy by the age of 5. In terms of guidance, in the US, it's recommended that children who are believed to be most likely to develop a peanut allergy, infants who had severe eczema, allergy, egg allergy, or both, introduce these children to peanut-containing food at 4 to 6 months, or get a referral to an allergist who will give the child a skin prick test or a blood test to see if the child is allergic to peanuts. European guidelines make similar recommendations about the early introduction of peanut and egg between 4 and 6 months. Whilst the NHS guidance suggests that delaying the introduction of peanut and eggs may increase the risk of developing the allergy, I believe that currently there needs to be more information given to parents when their child is showing early signs of allergy. Having spoken to young parents and parents-to-be, the feedback I have had is that too often the information for these children is either too difficult to find or the medical professional that they're engaging with is more likely to take a safety-first approach and not encourage the early introduction of allergens. I believe a review of the guidance will help to empower our NHS to give the best, most medically appropriate information to parents at a time when they can be at their most anxious. This must be supported by education and awareness campaigns, together with training for the different healthcare professionals who support these new parents, so that the advice they give is both consistent and reflects best practice. Finally, as I touched on at the start, I have concerns that the current lack of guidance is most likely to impact young children from ethnic minority families. The evidence suggests that these children are more likely to develop an allergy and are also more predisposed to have multiple allergies. As a result, they are more likely to be disadvantaged if there isn't clear, unambiguous guidance on how their parents can navigate those first few months. I ask honourable members from across this House for their support with the bill, so that we can support parents to give their children the best allergy advice, and we can mitigate against the effects of, and ultimately, in many cases, prevent allergic disease. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
The question is that the honourable member have leave to bring in the bill. As many as of that opinion say aye, of the contrary no, I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Who will prepare and bring in the bill?
Jim Shannon, Chris Blaw, Alex McIntyre, Sarah Coombs, Kirith Entwistle, Jodie Gosling, Maya Ellis, Pam Cox, Claire Hughes, Satvir Kaur, Catherine Fuchs and myself.
Becky Gittins.
Babies and Infants Allergy Guidance Bill.
Second reading what day?
Friday the 12th of September.
Friday the 12th of September. The clerk will now proceed to read the orders of the day.
English Devolution and Community Empowerment Bill, second reading.
Now.
The reasoned amendment in the name of the official opposition has been selected. Minister to move the second reading. Angela Rayner.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I beg to move that the bill be now read a second time. Madam Deputy Speaker, this government was elected on a manifesto to deliver change. Real change for working people. Change that people can see and feel around them. That means more money in their pockets, decent jobs, new homes, good transport links, thriving high streets and opportunities for young people. But after 14 years of a Tory government unwilling to take the tough choices to make life better for working people, it's no wonder that people have lost hope that real change is possible. And we have a plan to change this, to give people with skin in the game real control over their lives, the power to have a real stake in their place and share in our country's success. Our landmark English Devolution and Community Empowerment Bill will deliver this and more. It will help us to build a modern state based on a fairer, stronger partnership between government and local people, with the aim of renewing people's faith that the state can work for them. Madam Deputy Speaker, that faith has been sorely tested in recent years. After over a decade of broken promises from the benches opposite, people associate Whitehall with a failure and decline. The communities that once built Britain have seen good jobs disappearing, secure homes crumbling, and once strong communities divided. Things that our parents and grandparents once relied on, that I relied on as a young mum, fallen by the wayside. And it's my mission to rebuild these foundations of a good life for all communities in all parts of our country. I worked on the front line of local government and I saw how it changes people's lives. So I know I won't achieve our goals unless we fundamentally change the way our country is run. And that means handing power back to where it belongs, to local people with skin in the game, so that they can make decisions on what really matters to their communities. This is what the bill will do. Drive the biggest transfer of power from Whitehall to our regions and communities in a generation, and ending the begging bowl micromanaging culture. It'll be making devolution the default setting, giving mayors new powers over planning, housing and regeneration to get Britain building as part of our plan for change. Rebuilding local government so that it can once again deliver good local services that people can rely on, and empowering local communities to have a bigger say in shaping their local area. I'll give way.
The Right Honourable Lady for giving way. But in her attempts to drive this cart horse of devolution forward, does she not accept, or will she tell us where the accountability, where the scrutiny is going to come from, and where the voice of local people is really going to have a place to be heard?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm really disappointed because I thought the previous government were the ones that really turbocharged devolution, and we're moving on that agenda. We actually do believe that devolution is a good thing, and that these measures that we're taking will enable mayors and local areas to be empowered more to drive that growth that we desperately need in all parts of the country. Madam Deputy Speaker, this is long overdue. England is one of the most centralised developed countries in the world, and as a result, the system too often works against rather than with local people. Too many decisions affecting too many are made by too few. That, combined with short-term sticky plaster politics, has left the country in a doom loop of worsening regional divides. I'll give way.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I thank the Right Honourable Lady for giving way. You may wonder why, Madam Deputy Speaker, a Scot would make an intervention at this point in the debate. Could I advise the Right Honourable Lady to look north to Scotland to see how it should not be done? Because the Scottish Government has centralised powers right away from communities like my constituency. That's how we should not do it. A cautionary tale.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I thank the Honourable Member for his guidance and advice, and I always look north, contrary to other people's beliefs. Very proud of the north. And I gently say to the Honourable Member as well, is that I think the challenge is regarding the government of Scotland at the moment, and hopefully we can reverse that and have a government that truly believes in putting the power in local people's hands. And Madam Deputy Speaker, you only have to look at the difference being made by our mayors to see there is a better way. From building tens of thousands of new social homes with Mayor Rotherham in Liverpool, to fighting child poverty with Mayor McGuinness in the North East, to making people's communities quicker and commutes quicker and cheaper with Mayor Burnham in my own Greater Manchester, London's summer al fresco dining and world-leading culture by Mr Khan. I'll happily give way on that point.
Thank you. My right honourable friend has been very generous. We're very proud of the work of our Greater Manchester Mayor, Andy Burnham. On the issue of driving change, I'd like just to raise a point about drivers. Half of private hire taxis in Greater Manchester are licensed outside the area. It undermines local enforcement and accountability, as well as local drivers that do the right thing. Does my right honourable friend agree that this bill is the chance to fix that, protect passengers, raise and maintain standards and back the best in trade?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, as my honourable friend as another Greater Manchester MP will know, that Mayor Andy Burnham has been trying to take steps towards taxi licensing for some years, and I think, Madam Deputy Speaker, you was hearing the statement that was previous to this that I was listening to intently, and I think the Minister there, as well as myself, is very clear that the commitment is to bring forward that legislation as quickly as possible, and we need to make sure that that vehicle is there, and the Leader of the House is sat next to me as well, whose job it is to make sure that that happens. We've also increased opportunities and given young people a voice in decisions in the East Midlands with Mayor Ward, and we're driving forward a new mass transit network for West Yorkshire with Mayor Brabin, to supporting women and girls into activity and sport with Mayor Skeef in the North Yorkshire, and not to forget the working to secure the future of Doncaster Sheffield Airport with Mayor Coppard in South Yorkshire, securing the extension of the Birmingham tram line with Mayor Parker, and I'll give way.
I thank the Secretary of State for giving way. For many years under the Tories, the West Midlands was at the bottom of the league table for regional transport investment, but Mayor Richard Parker has secured £2.4 billion of investment to extend the metro. Will she confirm that the powers in this bill will make it easier for combined authorities to deliver these kinds of projects in the future, including, I hope, further extensions of the metro to South Birmingham?
Well, I thank my honourable friend and again give full credit to Mayor Richard Parker, who has been working tirelessly, Madam Deputy Speaker, with the Labour Government to invest in the future of Birmingham. And I also thank my honourable friend for his campaigning, pressing the case his constituents are better off for it. The investment will bring new jobs, better transport links, and with this bill, this is just the start. And I give way.
I thank her for giving way. Speaking of jobs, in London, our Labour Mayor Sadiq Khan, over his first 2 terms, has seen the creation of over 330,000 jobs by the Greater London Authority. These are high-quality, well-paid jobs, bringing huge opportunity to Londoners from all walks of life. Does the Secretary of State agree that this is the testament to growth that devolution can deliver, which will only be further boosted by this bill?
You agree with all
I absolutely agree with my honourable friend, Madam Deputy Speaker, and this is about unlocking growth in all parts of the country, and I would hope that most honourable members would see that people with skin in the games working across the board to make sure that potential is reached, not just in London, which London is incredibly important to that, but also across all of our regions. I'll give way.
Right Honourable Member for giving way. I firstly want to thank Mayor Tracy Brabin for the investment she's making across West Yorkshire in mass transit, as well as a new bus station in my town, one of my towns of Dewsbury. However, separate from those investments and the gratitude, how will this bill and this new legislation stop a council from making decisions that distribute the funding and their spend unequally across the borough, and how would it stop a council from making a decision to shut down a sports centre that was used by people of all ages on the pretense of RAC, and not take the steps to investigate and have a plan to reopen?
Well, first of all, Madam Deputy Speaker, I welcome his comments in regard to the mass transit network for West Yorkshire, which I'm sure will bring added benefits to his constituents. In terms of the other elements, Madam Deputy Speaker, then obviously local councils with their elected officials make decisions. And what I would gently say to the honourable member is that councils have faced significant pressures, which I'm sure he's aware of, since 2010 austerity. I was in local government at the time and remember being a union rep, seeing the devastation. What we're trying to do is restore local government, empower them, and instead of them having to make incredibly difficult decisions that are harmful to their constituents, is actually being able to grow our economy, a bigger slice of the cake, and we're already investing more into local government so that we can deliver those services that people want. Within this bill, which I will come on to, is the community assets element, which might be able to help communities on the high street and in regards to sports facilities that they can utilise as an asset that they value in their local area. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, we're also improving local transport for people in the west of England with Mayor Godwin. Our brilliant, ambitious mayors are making a difference every day for their regions, working with them. We've already achieved so much after just a year in office. We're on track to achieve devolution across almost 80% of the country, covering 44 million people. We've created integrated funding settlements for Greater Manchester and the West Midlands, giving their mayors tools and freedoms to make decisions to get growth going. With Liverpool City Region, London, the North East, South Yorkshire and West Yorkshire set to benefit from the same freedoms next year. I'll give way.
I'm grateful to my right honourable friend for giving way. We are in London, greatest city in the world, in some opinions anyway. And our mayor there, and we've all just come back from holiday, have we not? So our mayor there, Sadiq Khan, has got ambitious plans to levy an accommodation overnight tax that would put us on a par with Paris and New York, an overnight stay levy to harness our growth, and those funds could generate tourism as a sector and improve the visitor experience. I wondered if she might be open for using this bill to give mayors everywhere the power to devolve that decision for those kind of things.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, much as the provocation is, any new tax matter is, of course, a matter for the Chancellor at the budget, and it must balance the potential revenue and the benefits against the impact of taxpayers and the economy. So, I'll happily give one.
I thank the Secretary of State for giving way, and I really do welcome the bill's efforts to strengthen communities and local democracy. However, I'm worried that not enough is being done to protect private renters. In Lambeth, nearly a third of residents are renters, and we see that the rents are rising faster than wages, and the average renter is paying 72% more than the national average. That's leaving many families struggling and in poverty. The Renters' Rights Bill was definitely a step in the right direction, but it fell short on rent hikes. So does my right honourable friend agree that this bill is an opportunity to give metro mayors the power to bring in rent controls and protect renters in their cities?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I say that the Renters' Rights Bill does have measures within it that means that renters can challenge unfair rent hikes, and also the previous government said many times that they were going to do something about the Section 21 no-fault evictions. Our Renters' Rights Bill will make sure that we end Section 21 no-fault evictions, which is causing so much harm to her constituents and many people around the country. Madam Deputy Speaker, our devolution revolution is well underway, with others queuing up to join it. This is what we committed to in our manifesto, and we're delivering it through this bill. It will crucially make devolution the default for how the government does business, with new strategic authorities having powers to pilot and request new functions, and government having a duty to respond with certain requests, meaning that we can deliver devolution further and faster. I'll give way.
I'm very grateful to the Secretary of State for giving way. On that point of specifically devolving the ability to run pilots, and following up on the point made by my friend the member for Clapham and Brixton Hill, Bristol City Council has had a cross-party vote, including from Labour councillors, saying that they want the power to pilot rent controls. And recent results have come out that have shown that typical private renters in my constituency of Bristol Central spend 45% of their income on rents. That is not sustainable. This bill could offer the opportunity for that pilot. Please.
interventions have become far, far too long. There are many, many members in the chamber who wish to contribute, which the Deputy Prime Minister might think about before she takes too many more interventions. Angela Rayner.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I will pay attention to that. What I would say to the Honourable Lady is that she's absolutely right. There is a challenge in housing at the moment, which is also contributing to the rental situation for people, and that's why we've got a real big ambition to build more houses. This bill does give some more powers for us to have strategic planning so that we can get on with building the homes that people need. And the Renters' Rights Bill, Madam Deputy Speaker, does start to make progress so that we can make it fairer for renters, which of course the previous government promised but failed to deliver. I will make some progress now, Madam Deputy Speaker. The strategic authorities... The strategic authorities will be created as a new category of authority in law. They will make it easier for local leaders to work together over larger areas to drive through big pro-growth projects like integrated transport networks and, of course, housing. These will operate at 3 levels: foundation, mayoral and established mayoral, with the particular powers and responsibilities that each of them will have defined by the bill. Madam Deputy Speaker, working alongside parliamentarians and local councillors, mayors drive forward the delivery of people's priorities on driving growth, unlocking infrastructure and powering a national renewal from the ground up. That's why the bill will give them wide-ranging new powers in areas like transport, planning and economic development. I will make progress. We will create new planning powers to raise the mayoral community infrastructure levy, which has generated over £1 billion since 2012 in London, and alongside investment and leadership from Mayor Khan, helped the fund to fund the Elizabeth line. With the expansion of the remit, the bill will allow mayors that choose to raise a precept to spend the mayoral precept on a full range of functions, ensuring that local taxes are spent on local priorities. Now, I'm sure the Shadow Secretary of State will welcome this change, given that it was the party opposite that first introduced the mayoral precept nearly a decade ago, and Mayor Boris Johnson used the business rate supplement to help pay for Crossrail. And I hope the Shadow Secretary of State will wholeheartedly support the new powers in the bill so mayors can intervene in major strategic planning applications to unlock housing, as long as the housing is nowhere near his constituency, of course. And we will also introduce powers to licence shared cycle schemes so that they work for everyone and bikes aren't lying across pavements. The bill will also see more mayors take on police and crime commissioner functions and become responsible for fire and rescue functions, allowing them to take a joined-up approach to improving public safety.
On that point, will the Minister give way?
One more time, briefly. Thank you.
I thank the Secretary of State for giving way. In Southend, East and Rochford, we're a proud community, a proud coastal community, but we've been left behind in terms of connectivity, in terms of educational outcome, in terms of investment and skills. Does the Deputy Prime Minister agree with that? With this bill, we have a real chance to deliver long, meaningful change, a change that the residents of South and East and Rochford deserve.
I absolutely agree with my honourable friend, because this is about all areas being able to join up and create that inclusive growth for their areas, which is broader than a local authority level, but by combining those efforts, we can really unlock the potential, and his constituents will feel the benefit of that as we take this forward. The new powers, Madam Deputy Speaker, also mean new duties, including to produce a local growth plan, demonstrating how mayors plan to unlock growth through planning and house building, and a duty to cooperate with local government pension scheme managers so that mayors can attract investment into their local areas, unlocking jobs and opportunities. Mayors across the country will also be able to appoint commissioners to support them as their responsibilities grow, just like in London. And the bill strengthens the ability of mayors to work with the public sector, convening local partners so that mayors can lead with a helicopter view of public services across their region. Madam Deputy Speaker, we're backing the ambition and untapped potential of local areas with a more ambitious role for the mayors representing them. This has to be underpinned by elections that command the public confidence. Because of changes made by the last government, mayors can be elected on just a fraction of the vote, despite serving millions of people and managing multi-million-pound budgets. We can do better than this. The bill will therefore revert to a supplementary vote system for electing mayors and police and crime commissioners after the May 2026 elections to provide greater accountability and a strong personal mandate for mayors. In addition, the bill will bar mayors from also sitting as MPs, ensuring that local places benefit fully from having dedicated local champions.
Prime Minister for giving way. If she feels that mayoral authorities should have a supplementary vote and that gives them sufficient authority, why doesn't she feel the same for members of this House?
70,000 people.
Well, millions of people are represented by mayors and they have huge powers over big regions. We want mayors to have a strong personal mandate for the communities they serve, rather than being elected on a fraction of the vote. It is right that first past the post remains in place for general elections to maintain the constituency link. I'll give way. He's been very patient. Sorry.
I'm truly grateful to the Right Honourable Lady. This is, I hope, a non-party political point. The white paper in advance of this bill mentioned rightly that there'd been consultations on strengthening the standards and conduct framework for local authorities. This relates to a campaign which many of us have been involved in to try and protect local council clerks against bullying, and we were pleased to be called into that consultation. There's nothing about this in the bill. Does she plan to bring it forward in separate legislation?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I thank the honourable gentleman for raising this issue, which is a very important issue, and we do intend to bring forward legislation. Our response to the local government standards consultation sets out our plans for a whole system reform, including empowering local authorities to suspend councillors who are guilty of serious misconduct for up to 6 months, with the option to withhold allowances and institute premises and facilities bans. And we're committed to ensuring that misconduct is dealt with swiftly and fairly across the country, from local and to regional mayoral levels. So we do want to take action on this issue, and I thank the honourable member for his contribution. Let me be clear, Madam Deputy Speaker, stronger mayors and strategic authorities will not replace councils nor the crucial work of this House. MPs on all sides of the House will continue to be a vocal champion for their areas, and we expect mayors to engage in regular and constructive dialogue with MPs, working together in the best interests of their constituents. Alongside the freedom of mayors to focus on local priorities, my department is continuing to explore a local public accounts committee-style model to improve the system of accountability of scrutiny of local spending. This government expects mayors to use their new powers to deliver real change, not retain the status quo. This isn't about grandstanding or making a political point. It's about using the levers of growth to unlock infrastructure and drive investment. The role of local authorities in delivering vital local services and improving local neighbourhoods is essential, and it will continue. And we also expect to see strategic authorities working hand in glove with their constituent councils to deliver for their residents. Madam Deputy Speaker, the bill will help rebuild local government for the communities who depend on it day in, day out. And as a fit and legal and decent foundation of devolution, the bill will establish the Local Audit Office to help fix the broken, fragmented local audit system. We will also reform local authority governance, requiring councils with a committee system to move to a leader and cabinet model, and putting a stop to the new local authority mayorals being created. This change will streamline decision-making across all councils and making it easier for people to understand how their council is run. It will also give the government the tools to deliver local government reorganisation, resulting in better outcomes for residents and a significant savings which can be reinvested in public services and improving accountability. So that at all levels, Madam Deputy Speaker, we're backing local people to drive growth and greater opportunities for all. Because from top to bottom, the best decisions for communities are made by those who know their area best, which is why this bill will also give local communities across the country much needed new powers, like a bigger say in shaping their place through effective neighbourhood governance, with councils required to make sure that this is happening, and the tools to transform their high streets and neighbourhoods through a new community right to buy, Madam Deputy Speaker, to save the much-loved community assets like pubs, shops from being lost, and to protect sports grounds, which are at the heart of so many communities and a source of great local pride. The bill will also support our high streets by banning the unfair practice of upwards-only rent reviews, preventing the blight of vacant shop fronts. Because it's only when every community succeeds that our country succeeds. Madam Deputy Speaker, this bill and our reforms herald a new era for Britain, a new way of governing which puts politics in the service of working people. Where previous governments promised and failed the British people, this government is keeping faith. I note the reasoned amendment from the party opposite, and I must say, after the government left this country with the worst housing crisis in a generation, I'm dismayed that his party would oppose a bill which will unlock housing and planning on a vast scale. A bill which empowers local communities to take back control of their high streets by ending the Tory policy of upward-only rent reviews. A bill which will end the begging bowl culture of the last government while the Tories made empty promises to level up the country. This Labour government is getting on with the job. Within days of taking office, Secretaries of State were passing down newly won powers for the sake of our towns, cities and villages, with the Prime Minister leading the way. It has not always been easy, Madam Deputy Speaker, but real change takes hard work. We're rewiring Britain, and with it growth and opportunity. This is how British people will take back control and unite our country in times when we've never needed it more. And I commend this bill to the House.
The question is that the bill be now read a second time. Shadow Secretary of State, Sir James Cleverly.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Thank you. The English Devolution and Community Empowerment Bill. It is a title straight out of the Ministry of Truth. Because this isn't about devolution. It is a blatant power grab by the Deputy Prime Minister. A right honourable lady for whom I have a huge amount of respect. But it is clearly a power grab by her and her department. And it isn't about community empowerment at all. It's about stripping power from local authorities and concentrating it in Whitehall and the people who are being held by Whitehall in their hands. Big Brother would be proud. Centralisation is devolution. Whitehall diktat is community empowerment. And the fact that it does the opposite of what it claims, as we have set out in our reasoned amendment, is why we cannot give this bill a free pass. Because this bill sidelines communities. This bill forces restructuring without consent. This bill wastes money while families are facing higher bills because of Labour's mismanagement. This bill disrupts and distracts councils from building the homes that local people need. Those are our objections. That is what we have set out in our reasoned amendment. And if the government wants to win the confidence of this House rather than just shoehorning its backbenchers through the division lobbies, it needs to justify the demands embedded in this bill. And we will set out what those demands are. And through the debate and in the summing up, I sincerely hope that the government answers these questions. Why centralise control? Why raise taxes? Why deny residents their voice? These are the questions that are being asked, and these are the questions that the Treasury benches need to answer before credibly making progress through this House with this bill. Madam Deputy Speaker, the case is set out before the House. And before the benches opposite get too excited, let me put a few spectres that have been raised to bed. The Conservative Party believe in devolution, not just in theory, but in practice. We created many of the mayoral roles that currently exist. We created police and crime commissioners. We empowered parish councils and neighbourhood planning. We gave families the power to block excessive council tax rises. We devolved by consent, by agreement with local leaders, not by Whitehall diktat. Because the simple truth of the matter is Labour do not and have never believed in devolution, and they do not deliver meaningful devolution. They are a centralising party, and they centralise. They are abolishing councils. They are abolishing councils without consent. They are forcing councils to sign up to their model of restructuring, and they forced the postponement of elections in 9 county councils. This was unprecedented. Elections are the foundation of democracy, and denying them undermines public trust and confidence. Because in truth, denying residents their democratic voice was done for a very specific reason, and it was done because Labour fears what people would say to them at the ballot box.
Right, honourable gentleman, for giving way, but he's just listed a load of reasons of what the Tories did with devolution. Can he not deny that the reason we need devolution and the reason we need local government reorganisation is because his government significantly underfunded local government, which is now on its knees, and therefore we have to take action to get local government back in a good place, and devolution and local government reform is one of those actions.
Sir James Cleverly.
I think he said the quiet bit out loud, Madam Deputy Speaker. This is about putting up taxes on local people. This is what fundamentally this is about. That's exactly what this is about. And we know this to be true. And I promised the House, I did not tee up that intervention. This is the next bit that I had in my speech. Because Labour imposing this restructuring from the centre is leaving local people without a voice. It is about creating what this government wants, which is a cohort of subservient Labour mayors. And let's look at what Labour mayors actually deliver. And as I say, Madam Deputy Speaker, this was written before that intervention. Labour mayors put up taxes. Labour mayors increased the tax burden on local people. Liverpool City Region, up by 26%. Greater Manchester, up by 8%. West Yorkshire, up by 6%. And in Labour, under Sadiq Khan, up by over 70%, 70% since he took office in 2016. They're quiet now, aren't they, Madam Deputy Speaker? Because the truth hurts. Go on. Go on.
Could he answer then why they keep getting re-elected to mayor?
Sir James Cleverly.
I'll be mentioning Paul Bristow later on in my speech, Madam Deputy Speaker. And because the difference is that under Conservative mayors, we keep costs down. Ben Houchin, for example, delivering a zero preset. And if more places get mayors under this Labour proposal, how much more will local people pay. Will ministers, the Right Honourable Lady or whoever is replying from the Treasury benches, will she guarantee, or will they guarantee, that costs will not go up under this model? Will they guarantee that council tax won't rise under this model? Or is this another set of taxes on hard-working families by stealth? Because the truth is, the record of Labour mayors is that they increase taxes by well above the rate of inflation. And also, will the pressure on parish council precepts also hit hard-working local people in the pockets? Because on these benches, we are in no doubt that once again, under Labour, it will be hard-working families and local people that pay the price for their ineptitude. And it's not only families that will be hit. This bill forces councils to merge. And prudent councils that have been careful with their money will be forced to inherit the debt of other councils. How on earth is that fair? Penalising good financial management at local government level. And what protections will be in place to protect people from higher bills? Because looking through this bill, there are no protections that I can see, and I will give way.
I thank my right honourable friend for giving way. How does he think my constituents on the Isle of Wight feel about being fused under a combined mayor authority with Hampshire without having a single say on it?
James Cleverly.
Madam Deputy Speaker, this goes to the heart of these proposals, because for all their warm words about community engagement, about community voice, about communities actually having a say, this is a classic example. And I visited the Isle of Wight, not only in a personal capacity, but also as a guest of my honourable friend. And I know full well that whilst the County of Hampshire has got many, many, many excellent things, the people of the Isle of Wight want to maintain their autonomy, and they should have the right to do so if that is what they want. And it's not just that local councils will lose control of their finances. Local councils will lose control of their powers. These powers are being stripped from them through clauses in this bill. Mayors are gaining sweeping planning powers, sweeping transport powers, without council consent or indeed representation. Let me give you an example. What if communities oppose punitive anti-driver proposals coming from a mayor in their local neighbourhoods? How can they make their voices heard? Who will win? Will it be the mayor imposed upon them, or will it be the local communities? And what will be the accountability model for those mayors? Because there is nothing in the bill that we can see where people can hold mayors accountable. No provision for meaningful scrutiny during the tenure of the mayoralty. And she makes reference to the upward-only rent reviews. And I completely get that that is a superficially attractive set of proposals. But what actual assessment has been made on the effective valuation of commercial property, including properties which are owned by the local authorities themselves? And if she is confident it is such a good idea, why was there no scrutiny? Why was there no consultation of these proposals? Do ministers really think that that is best practice when it comes to creating a stable investment environment and confidence in people spending money in high street properties, commercial properties that keep our communities alive? The silence on those questions in this bill is frankly deafening, because they have no answer. Because this bill is not about empowering local communities, and it is definitely not about empowering local councils. It is about creating a cohort of puppet mayors controlled by the Right Honourable Lady's department. And I give a good, and as I say, I respect her enormously. Her ability to strip power, not just from local councils, but also from the Prime Minister, is something well worth watching. And I think that we should be at least impressed with that. But I put it to the benches opposite. If this is about community empowerment, why does it reduce local representation? If it is about fiscal responsibility, why will it burden ratepayers, council taxpayers, with debts that their local authorities did not create? If it is about more homes, why does it hamper and suffocate councils with increased bureaucracy? Madam Deputy Speaker, devolution can work, and it indeed does work when it is done properly. And we know that it works because Conservative mayors have delivered. Ben Houchin saved Teesside Airport. He delivered the UK's largest free port with 18,000 quality jobs. He secured Treasury North in Darlington with 1,400 high-skilled roles. All with a zero mayoral precept. Paul Bristow in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, ending Labour's ideological attack on drivers. Boris Johnson, whilst Mayor of London, delivering the 2012 Games and securing Crossrail. And in the West Midlands, Andy Street, a genuine champion for his region, a household name, and replaced by who? A person who isn't even a household name in his own household. And that says it all. We Conservatives deliver. We delivered devolved government, which delivered infrastructure, delivers jobs, delivers economic growth. And what has Labour delivered? Higher costs and broken promises. More tax, less delivery. That is the Labour way.
I thank him very much for giving way. Sorry for treading on his punchline there. I was very pleased to hear the Right Honourable Gentleman's newfound enthusiasm for Teesside. It's something that we all share. But it seems to stand at odds with the comments he made to my predecessor about the town of Stockton. Would he like to, does he stand by those comments, those terrible comments that he made? Or would he like to take this opportunity to apologise to my constituents?
Madam Deputy Speaker, he really does need to keep up. I addressed those comments at the time. I've been to Stockton. I've campaigned with my good friend and colleague, the Conservative Mayor for the town, and he will know, because I've campaigned, I've knocked on doors at Stockton. I have a huge amount of respect for the town. The point I was making was about the then Labour representative, who I was not terribly impressed with, and he knows that is the case. The simple fact of the matter is we were always deeply sceptical that the content of the bill would match the aspirational title of the bill. So we set 5 tests, and those tests were framed in the form of 5 simple questions. 1, is it a genuine choice for councils? 2, do all affected tiers agree with the changes? 3, is there genuine public support for the changes? 4, will the changes keep bills down? And 5, will the changes protect social care? And having looked through this bill, it is clear that the answer to every single one of those questions is no. 5 questions, 5 failures. Madam Deputy Speaker, as I have said, Conservatives are in favour of devolution when done properly, but only if that devolution is actually meaningful, only if local communities and their immediate representatives actually have got the power to deliver. We are its champions because we delivered it. We have proven that it works, but it must be by consent. It cannot be by compulsion. It should be by partnership, not imposition, by empowering councils and councillors, not by erasing them. This bill is not devolution. This bill is central control. This bill is higher taxes. This bill is weaker local democracy. This bill is a power grab by the Right Honourable Lady. It fails to deliver on its promise, and that is why the House must decline to give a second reading and demand that the government rethinks these proposals.
Before I call anybody else, with the exception of the Liberal Democrat spokesperson, there'll be an immediate 5-minute time limit. Paul Foster.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I rise to support the English Devolution and Community Empowerment Bill at second reading, which is a vital step towards modernising local government and delivering fairer investment and greater accountability across England. I do this with 17 years' experience as a local councillor, 5 of which as leader of South Ribble Borough Council in Lancashire, which forms part of my constituency. Although the scope of the bill covers many distinct subject matters, I intend to focus my brief comments, listening to what you've said, Madam Deputy Speaker, on Part 3, Chapter 1, Local Government Reorganisation. Let's be clear, Lancashire is now an outlier. While 74% of England's population live under unitary authorities, delivering all local services through a single accountable body, Lancashire remains part of the shrinking 26% operating under a two-tier system. And frankly, no one would design the two-tier system today. It's inefficient, confusing and expensive. Residents don't understand why one council is responsible for potholes and roads and another for pavements and parks, or why education sits at county while planning sits with the district, why one council collects their waste and another council disposes of it, why they are paying for 2 different sets of local councillors for the same geographical area, 15 chief executives and senior management teams when they only actually require 3 or 4, why our neighbours in Greater Manchester and Liverpool City region all unitaries, but Lancashire is left with 2 tiers of bureaucracy. The result? Duplicated services, inefficient staffing and confused accountability. But we know change works. In South Ribble, through shared services with our district council neighbour Chorley, we've saved over £1 million for local taxpayers. Real money back into local budgets. Imagine what could be achieved with a fully unitary structure across Lancashire. In my time as leader of South Ribble Borough Council, I froze council tax for 3 consecutive years, while still delivering effective and efficient frontline services. Yet our residents' council tax bills kept rising, as Lancashire County Council annually increased their tax due to their inefficiencies. My community were confused by these council tax bills, not understanding that the local district council only accounted for around 11% of their overall bill. And in fact, they were paying more to the Police and Crime Commissioner than to their district council. And beyond efficiency, this is about fully unlocking devolution. Lancashire has been left behind. We will end up being one of the largest counties in the north of England without a metro mayor. We've missed out already on hundreds of millions of pounds of investment seen in Greater Manchester, the West Midlands, West Yorkshire and the Liverpool City region. That's why I really welcome the powers in this bill that allow the Secretary of State to mandate reorganisation where appropriate, from a 2-tier system to a unitary model. It's a necessary tool to drive reform, and I commend the Secretary of State and Local Government Minister for their bold vision. Thank you.
The original question was that the bill be now read a second time since when an amendment has been proposed as on the order paper. The question is that the amendment be made, and I call Liberal Democrat spokesperson Vicky Slade.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And may I start by welcoming the Shadow Secretary of State to his place on the front bench and refer to my register of interest as a Councillor of BCP and Vice President of the LGA. Transferring power closer to communities by devolution is critical in getting service delivery right and developing trust. The public consistently say they have more faith in local government than national government, and the English Devolution and Community Empowerment Bill was meant to deliver on that promise. And in the first weeks in office, as the Secretary of State has already said today, the Prime Minister said he wanted to give power to those with skin in the game and pledged to help citizens take back control. And the Liberal Democrats absolutely agree with that desire. But what we see here is a bill that centralises decision-making, limits community influence, and because it leaves areas unsure of their future, risks deepening inequality between regions. The White Paper promised mayors for all regions and community-led reorganisation, but this bill gives powers to merge councils from Westminster, but fails to strengthen the councils closest to people, our towns and parishes. And it even allows councils that have directly rejected a combined authority to be forced into one with their neighbours.
On that point, my honourable friend.
Of course.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for giving way. Would she agree that the Conservatives have some nerve talking about top-down reorganisation when they impose an unwanted and unpopular unitary council on the whole of Somerset against people's wishes expressed in a poll? Would she also agree that what this bill should be doing is introducing fair votes to restore faith in democracy and in politics for this place as well as for councils across the country?
Yeah. I thank my honourable friend for his intervention. A similar thing happened in Dorset. In fact, the honourable member for Christchurch actually voted against a merger in our area and failed even under his own government. I will come on to the issues of proportional representation. Strategic mayors have the potential to be regional champions, and Liberal Democrats recognise the benefits they've brought across many cities, including London and Manchester. But this bill fails to standardise their role or provide an equal footing for all regions. Some areas selected for early adoption and funding, while others, like Kent, Medway and my own area of Wessex, are left behind with no timeline or support to a conclusion.
Of course. I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for giving way. Some areas, like Shropshire, it's very unclear where they will end up being made to form a combined authority, and they're also on the border with Wales and Cheshire, a different region, and so there's no obvious partner for them. I'm very concerned that Shropshire is going to end up forced into a combined authority with an area that doesn't look like Shropshire and doesn't give any benefit to Shropshire's residents. Would you agree with me that this needs to be better thought through?
I thank my honourable friend for intervention, and I share concerns that in some areas there is a real risk that areas could be left behind and that there's a muddled approach. So I'm asking the assurances from the Secretary of State about how we can ensure those areas don't fall further behind their neighbours who are further along the programme. As Liberal Democrats, we are pleased the Government is reversing the Conservatives' disastrous decision to use first past the post for mayors and police commissioner elections. Yeah. It is ridiculous that one of the mayors elected this May won on just 25% of the vote. But we would like to see the Government go further in making votes fair. We believe that the Government should be bringing in an alternative vote system so voters' voices are properly heard, and we continue to make the case that if the Government believes in majority support for elected officials, why not extend this mandate to MPs and councillors too?
Yeah. Of course. I thank the honourable member for giving way, and the Sussex mayoralty elections that are due to take place in May next year will be on the current system of first past the post rather than on the proposed system that this government says they're in favour of. Does she agree with me that that's totally unfair for the Sussex residents when everybody else that's a year behind the programme get to vote in a better system?
I thank you for that intervention, and in fact I'll skip to something later on in my speech where I share the concern of electoral officials that this legislation can deliver in time for any of the changes that are scheduled for next year, and whilst I recognise that there is an anomaly for next year, even electoral officials are worried about the timeline for this bill to make any change for 2026 and for those people who already had elections delayed. Across the sector, there are serious concerns about the powers of the commissioners that will be appointed by mayors, people with significant influence but little scrutiny, and concerns that they could hold more sway than the elected leaders of local authorities but without any democratic accountability. And in the very centre, the Secretary of State retaining sweeping powers to merge authorities and extend functions without parliamentary oversight or local consent. So I'm seeking an explanation of how and when those powers would be used so that we can assure our local leaders that they're not going to be overridden. There's widespread concern about the loss of highly skilled, experienced councillors through the removal of district councils. And I noted the Secretary of State's own concerns about putting the power into the hands of too few people. So I'm wondering how we can be assured that there isn't a democratic and skills deficit and that people are properly represented across their larger regions. For the last decade, the Conservative government has cut funding to councils but forced them to do more. Their economic mismanagement and failure to fix social care has left many councils on the brink of collapse. This bill was an opportunity for real local government reform, and I feel it's an opportunity missed. Local authorities...
Of course. I thank the Honourable Lady for giving way. A particular concern of my constituents in Tiverton and Minehead, of course we share two local authorities, one in Devon, one in Somerset, is the real difficulties we have around Send. I wonder if you would take into account the difficulties that this bill could potentially create for local authorities who are really trying to struggle to deliver good Send education for so many of our children.
Vicky Slade.
I thank the Honourable Member for her intervention. Special educational needs, as I'm sure the House will have heard me talk about many, many times, is a huge passion of mine, and it is going to take so many councils to a very, very dark place. And I trust that the Minister hears that on a regular basis, and that we will be seeing in the Fair Funding Review something really serious about special educational needs. Local authorities have unique access to every household and business, which gives them a huge opportunities to improve people's health and well-being. And this bill requires strategic authorities to improve the health of their communities. But I'm concerned that there doesn't provide substantial funding to do that, and without that funding, I cannot see how it can be achieved. Whilst the bill makes substantial improvements to the workings of audit, it does miss the opportunity to shine a light on all of the places that taxpayers' money is spent through the introduction of local public accounts committees. I was reassured to hear the Secretary of State refer to this being in her thinking, but rolling them out alongside strategic authorities would really aid transparency, improve value for money, and enable organisations to share resources for the good of the community. And I would urge the Government to reflect on this as we go towards the report stage. The bill also proposes that strategic authorities take on the functions of police and crime commissioners and fire authorities. But because of the disparity on boundaries, there is a real risk that community priorities will not be maintained, and with this being controlled by appointed rather than elected commissioners, further reduces democratic accountability. So how will the Government ensure fair funding and effective policing and fire services where strategic authorities cover vastly different communities? Councils have expressed similar concerns where there's a mismatch between places within those authorities. For example, the different needs between urban and rural, or the inclusion of a single authority among a cluster with very different levels of deprivation or demographics. Where decisions are decided by simple majority votes, some communities feel their voice will not be heard. Weighted voting and the meaningful inclusion of town and parish councils can ensure local insight is retained, particularly around issues like planning and transport. But representation must not end there. This bill was an opportunity to ensure that local services draw on and are informed by the full range of lived experiences in an area.
Would my honourable friend give way?
Of course.
I'm grateful for giving way. Does she share my concerns that this bill could actually increase the difficulty in residents having accessing services where authorities that currently deliver services on a county-wide basis are then cracked and split into multiple authorities, creating borders within counties that could then make it difficult to access services?
My honourable friend makes a very good point, and there is also the opportunity, of course, to use more effectively our town and parish council systems to grow community empowerment. Instead, the creation of neighbourhood committees feels like a top-down solution. Without statutory powers or budgets, they risk becoming symbolic rather than effective. And whilst it's welcome that existing town and parish councils can participate, the bill doesn't provide a framework for communities wanting to establish new councils or the funding to do so. District councils have long underpinned the civic identity of towns and driven the activities that reflect their origins. And with their loss, some of these very ancient towns and cities, like Colchester and Winchester, without the funding to support smaller community-led councils, there's a real risk our distinct history, culture and civic pride in our communities could be eroded. We cannot allow that to happen. Turning to the changes on community right to bid, the Liberal Democrats welcome the changes to a right to buy with first refusal. I've seen some fantastic examples of this working, such as the Anchor Pub in Shapwick in my constituency of Mid Dorset and North Poole, but the successes are few and far between.
Of course. I thank my honourable friend for giving way on that point. Certainly communities like the one in Teddington in my constituency will very much welcome this new community right to bid, where we've had playing fields laid derelict for over a decade at Udney Park. However, whilst the bill makes provision for what happens where there is a disagreement over price, it is silent on whether, even at market valuation, a community bid is refused by the buyer. Will she agree with me that the government must look to go further on this point?
Yeah. I agree with the Honourable Member that there's opportunities to do much more around this as we move into the Bill Committee stage. And communities long struggle to save these assets, not because of a lack of passion or volunteers, but because the system feels stacked against them. The Museum of Broken Dreams, which is currently on display elsewhere on the parliamentary estate, shows some really good examples of this, where community groups have lost out to commercial developers who then demolish buildings and walk away, or where they can't get the support to assist. We are pleased to see sporting assets included in the right to buy and welcome their indefinite inclusion on the register, but we would like to see environmental assets included as well so that we can protect our land for restoration and nature management. One moment. I also would like to look at restoring the funding for neighbourhood plans so that smaller authorities who are now going to struggle to make those plans for their tiny communities can do so without onerous cost to their residents.
I'd like to thank my honourable friend for giving way. I'd like to pick up on her point about environmental concern. At the moment, local authorities have a very weak duty on biodiversity from time to time to consider what they might do to conserve or enhance biodiversity. Does my honourable friend agree that the Devolution Bill offers a real opportunity to strengthen these environmental protections to get this country back on track?
I believe that this community right to buy has huge opportunities for councils, and I hope that in the time we spend in committee we'll be able to improve and enhance the bill for everybody. As a former retail business owner, I welcome the removal of upward-only rent reviews. Businesses should not be locked into rising costs when market conditions shift, and it's a long overdue reform that will help small businesses adapt and survive. The bill makes some interesting and welcome changes on things like pension schemes and transport devolution, but does miss these opportunities to also improve council standards and attendance, and fails to establish in statute the promised Council of Regions and Nations and the Local Authority Leaders Council, both of which are important for giving local government a stronger voice in Whitehall. In conclusion, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Liberal Democrats support the principle of devolution. We recognise the crisis in local government funding, and we welcome the fair funding review promised later this autumn. But this bill does not deliver the ambitious shift of power our communities need. It risks disenfranchising places left at the back of the queue with no funding or timeline to work forward. We cannot support a bill that centralises control, weakens local accountability and misses the chance to truly empower communities, as we laid out in our reasoned amendment, and we urge the government to think again, revise and recommit to genuine devolution and community empowerment so that we can support it.
I call Alison Taylor.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I draw the House's attention to my register of interests, including that I remain a Fellow of the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors? My contribution today is to assist the Secretary of State and the Government in ensuring this important bill truly delivers on my right honourable friend's ambitions for a transformative change to our communities, a vision that we both share. Others in the House will want to articulate the advantages of devolving power and increasing strategic focus for the English regions. But I have an expertise in commercial leases, so forgive me for focusing on this one point. The bill represents a crucial step in the vital work of promoting economic growth and opportunity for our communities. Our constituents will all have witnessed firsthand how the previous government's failure to promote growth and support economic activity has contributed to the decline and the well-being of our communities. As a result, Madam Deputy Speaker, of spending 30 years in the commercial property industry, numerous organisations and businesses have contacted me directly about the proposals to ban upwards-only rent reviews. The Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors is already working in making lease terms, including rent reviews, more transparent, and since 2020, the Code for Leasing Business Premises in England and Wales, first edition, which includes advice on rent reviews, has been in place for chartered surveyors to adhere to when advising both landlords and tenants. The proposal to implement by legislation a universal ban on leases, on clauses with commercial leases for the provision of upwards-only rent reviews creates uncertainty for the funding of property development. My concern is that this legislation would apply to all commercial properties, not just high street retail or small business properties. As currently drafted, the government's proposals would impact on high street retail, but on all commercial sectors as well. The ambition to protect the high street retail and small business, particularly in tough economic conditions, is certainly not underestimated nor unwelcome by me. There is a surplus of vacant, unsuitable, poorly configured and energy-hungry retail units crying out for regeneration in most towns across the United Kingdom, as there are in the towns of Paisley, Renfrew and Erskine in my own constituency. But I don't believe that it is just upward-only rent reviews that are preventing the regeneration of our towns and cities. This technical aspect of the bill is an issue where my professional background can help to improve the bill and help to prevent unintended consequences for the government's growth agenda. I really understand the desire to support small businesses on our high street, and I understand the pressures faced by small businesses through difficult trading conditions. Madam Deputy Speaker, property development can be the foundation stone of economic growth in our regional economies. My experience is that new sustainable development in the right place can be transformative, a source for jobs and training in construction, and a source of employment and opportunity in operation. New, transformative, sustainable development adds vitality to an area, acting as a spur to further development and wider investment. Madam Deputy Speaker, I know that all members will intuitively feel that upwards-only rent reviews are unfair, but this is a simplistic view. One of the earliest pioneers of upwards-only rent reviews was the Church of England's Church Commissioners. They did this to ensure certainty of income for the Church, and they remain one of the largest landowners in the country. My concern is that this well-intended focus on the genuine problems of small business and the high street could have unintended consequences for the broader property development sector. If I might close, Madam Deputy Speaker, by encouraging my right honourable friend to consider an amendment to this clause to ensure it focuses where it's needed most without impacting on all sectors of property. I will, of course, stand by, ready to help with this endeavour. Thank you.
Peter Fortune.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This bill is supposed to be the government's flagship piece of legislation to empower England's cities, regions and communities. But there is disappointingly little in the bill about strengthening accountability in existing devolved bodies, especially the Greater London Authority. It is right that power is returned to cities, regions and communities, but those who hold devolved power must also be held accountable for their decisions, actions and delivery. Nowhere in England enjoys more devolved powers than London. That is in part why it is the only area with a directly elected assembly devoted to scrutiny. But as the Mayor of London's responsibilities, powers and budget has grown, the Assembly has become weaker and weaker in comparison. A notable issue is the two-thirds majority that's required to amend the Mayor's budget and strategies. But this is impossible to achieve in the London Assembly. And that's why no budget or strategy has been amended in 25 years. Nor can the Assembly call in mayoral decisions, unlike other combined authorities. And unlike combined authorities, London's 32 boroughs are excluded from decision-making. It means the Mayor does not have to seek consensus, negotiate, or even listen to opposing views. And in a city the size of London, it effectively alienates and disenfranchises millions of people. That political fracture was made clear when Mayor Khan imposed ULEZ expansion on Outer London despite overwhelming opposition. There is a glaring democratic and accountability deficit in London. And that's why so many of my, other constituents are now questioning the London Borough of Bromley's place in the Greater London Authority. They've never paid more to City Hall, yet people feel they are ignored on every issue. Mayor Khan has increased council tax by 77% in 9 years. 77%, meaning Londoners now pay nearly £500 a year on average to fund his policies. And let's not forget the huge sums Londoners now pay City Hall thanks to his road charges. In the first 3 months of this year, motorists forked out nearly 220 million thanks to Mayor Khan's ULEZ charge, the Blackwall Tunnel toll and his height congestion charge. And what do they receive in return for all this money? ULEZ cameras, too few police officers and greenbelt protections ripped up. Madam Deputy Speaker, anyone who wants to see devolution in London succeed must support measures to make the Mayor of London more accountable. Firstly, this bill introduces simple majority voting in combined authorities as the default decision-making process. But it stops short of doing that in the London Assembly. This is a mistake. It should abolish the two-thirds majority requirement to amend budgets and strategies, allowing a simple majority of Assembly members to force changes. This alone would transform London's politics and force mayors to the table. Secondly, this government should consult on a new model to give the 32 boroughs a voice and a vote in London, so Bromley can no longer be ignored. And finally, this bill should give the London Assembly the power to call in mayoral decisions. Madam Deputy Speaker, my constituents in Bromley and Biggin Hill have had enough of being ignored by the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan. If the government wants to maintain Londoners' support for devolution, then the London Mayor must be made accountable.
Jack Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Devolution and local government reorganisation must not simply be a sticking plaster over the problems of today, but instead we must determine what we want the coming decades to look like for our local communities. We must ensure that people in places like Ipswich and Suffolk have the resources, powers and trust to determine our own futures. We can end the fragmentation of services and decision-making that has times hampered progress and instead usher in a new era of energy, ambition and delivery. And it has been really encouraging to see all of Suffolk's district and borough councils, led by different political parties, working collaboratively and with compromise to form a forward-facing submission. However, disappointingly, the contrast with Suffolk County Council is stark, and it has been really concerning to see that more time has been spent aiming to discredit alternative ideas and proposals rather than promoting why their plans are right for our county. Tactics have at times been bizarre, but there is a serious point here. Residents are entitled to proper information and not a spin-heavy PR campaign. And look, I fully accept that turkeys don't vote for Christmas, but I do expect local authorities to hold themselves up to a higher standard. And yes, while it portrays a lack of confidence in their own proposals by running such a misleading campaign, it does them a disservice, but more crucially, it treats local residents with a lack of respect and no little disdain. And residents will also question why the Conservatives at Suffolk County Council are spending so much money and resources on such an overwhelmingly negative campaign at a time when our potholes go unfilled and our children with special educational needs are so badly failed, all the while we're raising council tax by its maximum level every single year. Suffolk County Council don't look like an authority ready to grasp the future, but one that looks to keep power and status for themselves. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, alongside the investment in our communities by my right honourable friend, the Chancellor, this bill and the wider efforts of my right honourable friend, the Deputy Prime Minister, offers Ipswich, Suffolk and East Anglia a once-in-a-generation chance to turbocharge investment, growth and opportunity, giving us the chance to determine our own future. And whilst I'm supportive of this bill for the transformative effect it will have on our country, on a local basis, a Greater Ipswich Council could do far more than just regenerate our town and the surrounding area. It could, in fact, become a nationally leading economic powerhouse. And our friends and neighbours in East and West Suffolk would also greatly benefit from being able to set the direction for their local communities too. Mr. Speaker, Madam Deputy Speaker, apologies. This is not just my personal view, but one shared by every district and borough council in Suffolk, as well as political parties of all stripes across Ipswich. And from my discussions with local residents, including at my recent town hall event, it also seems to be the option that they would favour too. A Greater Ipswich would renew our area's economic foundations and deliver the infrastructure we need after years of neglect. Lowestoft and the Energy Coast will be able to power new jobs and investment for their area, and Bury St Edmunds can better align themselves with the opportunities offered by the growth around Cambridge and Peterborough. People want their councils to deliver public services effectively, responsively and accessibly, which is why I believe our devolution settlement needs to produce unitary authorities with sufficient scale to achieve this. However, people rightly want their councillors and councils to be rooted in their local community so that they can listen, understand and act in their best interests. And that's why I believe that 3 unitary authorities in Suffolk, working alongside a mayor for East Anglia, achieves that balance. Indeed, this isn't about loosening the fabric that holds our county together, but about strengthening it. And I moved to Suffolk when I was 10 years old, a quarter of a century ago. It is my home and I care deeply about what happens next. And for a long time we've been ill-served as a town and a county by short-termism and a do-nothing approach. And every day I've entered this job, I've thought about all the ways we can leverage the change that we need to set us on a new path. And the bill we are debating today is the driving force behind how we do that. And as my right honourable friend, the Deputy Prime Minister, has set out time and again, the goal of devolution must not be to tinker around the edges of our current system and to stick with a system that isn't working for anyone. Instead, we should look to the future and take this opportunity to transform local government, our public services and our communities for the better. So I proudly support this bill, and in doing so, I will continue to work for an ambitious devolution settlement that meets the needs of people in Ipswich, Suffolk and East Anglia.
Martin Wrigley.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. May I draw the House's attention to my register of interests as a sitting councillor still. In fact, when I came into this place, I sat in 3 different councils, so I speak from a good history of local council knowledge. This bill focuses on mayors, yet we hear of putting power in the hands of local people. Mayors in Devon, which is a vast area of different sorts of places, is quite different to thinking about a mayor of Greater Manchester with a single identity, let alone perhaps the idea of a mayor of Devon and Cornwall, but who knows. This is not power in local hands. Also, the idea that reorganising councils will save money is, I think, a fallacy. We will see a few senior executives go. We will not see numbers of people on the bins doing the streets, doing the work that needs to be done across Devon. That will not be reduced. This will not be a means of saving money. It will, in fact, cost a huge amount of money to do the reorganisation, which is not being funded. However, of course.
Thank you. Alluding to your point, the government has claimed measures, including merging councils, will save significant amounts of money. However, the County Council network has revealed reorganisation could make no savings and cost money. So does the honourable member agree with me that measures in this bill are based on out-of-date reports that risk further bankrupting local authorities?
I thank my honourable friend for her intervention and agree entirely. But in my remaining minutes, I would like to focus on 2 or 3 other areas not yet covered by my honourable colleague earlier. And in all powers and broad strategic aims, this bill, we forget key roles played by town and parish councils. In fact, it barely mentions them. It also misses out the role played by our national parks authorities. Parish and town councils are the first port of call for residents. They are closest to the ground, most responsive to the day-to-day needs of their communities. These are the truly local hands. As district councils disappear, their local assets of less significant value to the new unitary will likely suffer or be overlooked or sold off without considering local input from the town or parish council, despite any changes to the community right to buy, which we've heard has few and far between successes. There must be in the bill a statutory obligation to work with most local and community-rooted bodies, our parish councils, our town councils. A duty to cooperate must be put into this bill. Neighbourhood committees or areas, as vaguely set out as they are in the bill, may play a part in keeping planning and other local functions local within
local, but within the wider unitary geography, but must also consider and work with the town and parish councils that they cover. This must be a statutory requirement. The bill allows mayors to convene partners and request collaboration, but these are discretionary powers. They may be used or they may be ignored. There is no enforceable duty, no statutory requirement to cooperate, and that is a profound weakness. I'd like to come on to national park authorities. National parks aren't mentioned, not once. They carry the legal responsibilities for some of our most precious landscapes. National park authorities such as Dartmoor have a majority of members from a mix of local authorities, from 5 different authorities, and a minority of government-appointed members. Without changes, should Dartmoor end up completely within the boundaries of a new unitary, it will effectively be managed as part of that unitary and lose its unique identity. Its planning authority will be overridden and its strategic vision may be subsumed. We must protect Dartmoor and the other parks for people to freely access and enjoy, and not let greed rip it apart for mere profit. The bill must address how these authorities will maintain independence and protect the identities of the areas they serve. Another missed opportunity is the need to make the provision of public toilets a statutory responsibility. Too often councils in financial difficulties cut these vital facilities. And in Devon, we know that there will be no money left over once the SEND overspend has been paid for by the carefully managed districts and their reserves. It will be still a case of no money left. And finally, I welcome the return of the alternative vote for mayors, but would urge the government to go further and introduce a full proportional representation for all the new unitary councils. Absolutely making every vote count. Thank you.
Abdeslam Mohammed.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I congratulate the Deputy Prime Minister for bringing forward this bill, one that embeds our ambition and champions the promise of devolution. This will mark the biggest transfer of power from Whitehall to our regions in a generation. This means the protection of our public spaces will result in the improvement of our infrastructure and the strengthening of our local economy. Devolution should bring decision makers closer to the people who feel the impact and promote local accountability. And I wholeheartedly welcome the parts of the bill that will ensure this. The creation of a community right to buy, offering more oversight on local policing, and placing a duty on authorities to improve health and reduce health inequalities are also very welcome steps in the right direction. The spirit of the bill is one we should all support. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'd like to bring Clause 57 to the Government's attention, which effectively abolishes the committee structure and introduces a measure that will impact on Sheffield, one of 38 councils running under the committee governance system. Over 80,000 people in a democratic referendum in Sheffield voted decisively in favour of a modern committee structure over the leader and cabinet model that Clause 57 imposes. Through the referendum, Sheffield citizens chose collaboration through their committees instead of decision-making power concentrated in fewer hands. 6 years on from that referendum, the committee system works for Sheffield. It has delivered meaningful scrutiny where it was lacking before and proven its worth in those moments where public trust has been under threat. Yet we are not here to discuss the merits and disadvantages of these two models of local governance. What matters is that residents have made a democratic decision at a local level, and it is important for that mandate to be respected and upheld. And if the bill passes in its current form, Sheffield is one of several councils that will be forced to undo those years of democratic engagement. Madam Deputy Speaker, I have received countless emails from constituents and campaigners like It's Our City who have stressed just how important this democratic engagement has been for Sheffield, and they are right. One size does not fit all. This is a view echoed by the LGA. I will give way.
Friend for giving way. She's making an extremely informed and important point in her speech. Would she agree with me that for Sheffield and her council that the committee system has been better and more inclusive and more democratic for her residents than the original cabinet system? And would she endorse a view that any council that wants to go down a committee route, or any community that's already decided should retain that right.
Ahmed.
Thank you. I thank the Honourable Member for his intervention. The point that I'm going to make is about existing committee structures retaining their models rather than new committees going forward. This is a view echoed by the LGA, who have also called for councils to be able to retain their structures until local communities choose otherwise. And similarly for my constituents, this is a matter of principle. Until the people of Sheffield choose another structure in another referendum, as promised, their decision should be allowed to stand, with the same flexibility that is being offered to those who chose to directly elect council mayors. There is still time to reflect this flexibility in this bill, so I would like to ask the Deputy Prime Minister to meet with myself and my honourable friend, the member for Sheffield Hallam, as well as our local council leaders, to discuss the impact that this will have on our communities and their trust in local governance, and more importantly, to ensure that devolution works for Sheffield.
I call Charlotte Kane.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I draw members' attention to my register of interest as a sitting councillor on East Cambridgeshire District Council. We can all agree that power should be devolved as close to communities as possible, because they know what's best for their area far better than anyone else. Strong and empowered parish, city and principal councils, accountable to residents, help our democracy and take better decisions for the communities they serve. Sadly, this bill does not deliver that. While the government's intention of devolution by default is commendable, this bill represents centralisation by choice. Instead of genuine decentralisation of powers to communities, the bill we are debating today empowers regional mayors at the expense of local councils and the Secretary of State. Local councillors have expressed concerns such as the uncertainty this has caused at a time when councils are trying to set their budgets amidst the wider crisis in local government funding, and fears that bigger authorities, particularly in rural communities, will lead to weaker connections with the areas they serve. This bill has caused considerable uncertainty locally because it also comes at a time when integrated care boards are being changed, meaning relationships with key health partners are being doubly unsettled. Local councillors in my constituency are also concerned that this bill has been hastily drafted, meaning it doesn't fix some obvious anomalies in our existing boundaries, such as what some people have called the Newmarket Bight. The town of Newmarket is almost completely surrounded by my constituency. Many of my residents look to Newmarket for some of their services, and many in Newmarket look to Cambridgeshire for some of their services. Newmarket and the surrounding villages should have had the opportunity to choose between a Cambridgeshire-based unitary or a Suffolk-based unitary. I'm particularly concerned about the bill's provision to enable mayors of strategic authorities to appoint 7 unelected commissioners to deliver specific policy areas. We already have an established system for this very purpose. In most councils, we have an administration of elected councillors from which the leader of the council chooses a small group to form their cabinet. And in other councils, we have committees that are responsible for oversight of policy areas. I'm also, like a previous speaker, very worried about the government's plans to impose a leader and cabinet model on these authorities. East Cambridgeshire District Council has kept the committee system because this is what our residents tell us that they want. We can't have a minister telling us we can't run ourselves in the way our local community wants. Appointing commissioners rides roughshod over the current system of democratically elected councils by allowing mayors to nominate unelected commissioners to lead on policies. How can the public hold these commissioners to account if not at the ballot box? Who will scrutinise their judgment calls? How can we improve the transparency of their decision-making at a political level? This bill is a missed opportunity to meaningfully decentralise power to our communities and make a fundamental shift in where power lies in this country. Where the government is claiming to make devolution the default, they've introduced centralisation. These proposals weaken existing systems of accountability, and even in areas of the bill where progress is made, such as electoral reform, it tinkers at the edges. We urgently need a system where every vote counts, so we need proportional representation. True devolution comes as a result of grassroots consultation rooted in communities. Top-down attempts at devolution, such as this bill, sadly end in being well wide of the mark. People in my constituency don't want to be forced into a unitary authority, at the one hand too big to understand local needs, and at the other hand too small to cover the areas where they work, spend leisure time and receive healthcare. They don't want decisions to be taken by appointed commissioners rather than elected councillors. They would value real devolution and a proper say in the changes which they want. I urge the government to reconsider this bill so it delivers the devolution in England which people want.
Andy McNair.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I enormously welcome the second reading of this bill. It's a thoroughly rare thing for a government to seek to actively give up power. But this government does understand that we're going to deliver the economy that works for everyone. We need a new way of governing that shifts powers away from Westminster once and for all. And at the heart, this bill is about putting power back in the hands of communities, recognising decisions to be made by those who know their communities best and who are fully accountable for the consequences of those decisions. Now, for someone like Lancashire, it's a great opportunity to address the fundamental issues that have held us back for so long. My honourable friend from South Ribble explained the dysfunctional nature of Lancashire very eloquently, but to recap, we have 12 district councils, 2 unitaries, a county council and a police and crime commissioner. This sort of confusing two-tier structure, hollowed out by austerity, with little accountability and remote fragmented decision-making, sits in stark contrast with the clarity of leadership and devolved resources we see on our neighbouring city regions. We've had to watch Manchester, Liverpool and West Yorkshire forge ahead while we're stuck in a slow lane. And this lived reality is the status quo that the benches opposite the Shadow Secretary of State, who's no longer in this place, have sought to defend and maintain. But this bill gives us a chance to change all of that. It's a chance to take back control and empower our communities, a chance to rebuild local government, making more effective and saving money that can be reinvested in local services. It's a chance to bring resources that can turbocharge growth and deliver on our potential. So I urge Lancashire leaders to work together with a sense of urgency to grasp this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. But there is an additional challenge. Even with clear determination from local leaders, it will be at least 2 years until Lancashire has a mayor and a restructured combined authority. It will likely take much longer before we have the sort of capacity and capability that's already in place in the likes of Liverpool and Manchester. In that time, these city regions will move further ahead, whilst the risk is that Lancashire will fall further behind. Yet, as the new Lancashire Growth Plan shows, there's a bright future for Lancashire if we have the tools to create it. The plan identifies 12 transformational projects that will be game changers for us. These range from transport infrastructure to world-class innovation zones. Overall, the proposed project pipeline has the potential to attract over 20 billion of additional investment to our county. But as things stand, these are just bold ideas and possibilities. To take them to a stage where they're fully worked up investable proposals requires a sort of capacity and capability that Lancashire no longer has. This is in contrast with our neighbouring city regions, which have been able to use devolved resources to have full business cases and shovel-ready projects ready and waiting for the green light. We can see the result of this with the vast majority of infrastructure projects, infrastructure pipeline projects being located within strategic mayoral authorities. This stark contrast between the investment in established mayoral authorities and those like Lancashire just starting the devolution process risks embedding inequality within our regions. Places like Lancashire can't wait until the devolved authorities are in place. To stop this inequality taking root, we need support now to ensure that we can progress our transformational projects and deliver on our growth potential. The recent Green Book review, rather fortunately, recognised this issue and helpfully identifies some ways of addressing it, including expanding the Treasury Better Business Case programme, progressing the National Wealth Fund Strategic Partnership programme, and crucially, secondments from central government to the regions. This is exactly what we need in Lancashire, so we can start to deliver on our growth plan with our projects taking their place in the infrastructure pipeline. So, whilst I strongly welcome this bill and call again on councils to come together to seize the opportunities it offers, I do ask the government to work with Lancashire MPs and local leaders to ensure that Lancashire receives the upfront support that we need to start to catch up with our neighbours and play our full and rightful role in delivering growth and prosperity for all our communities.
Wendy Martin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Democracy matters, accountability matters, but I'm afraid this bill strips away both. At the heart of this, government's attempted reforms lies a democratic deficit. Planning committees lose their powers, councillors may scrutinise, but they cannot decide. Local councils are diminished, and in their place, a mayor is handed sweeping powers over planning, housing, infrastructure and even over development orders. This is not devolution downwards to communities, it's centralisation. And let us be absolutely clear, in the West Midlands, the Labour Mayor has shown time and again that his focus is on Birmingham, not communities such as mine in Aldridge Brownhills. And this bill will entrench that imbalance. It gives a licence to concrete over the green belt and drive a coach and horses through local democracy. And it leaves the elected member of Parliament with no formal way of holding him to account or even asking or questioning his decisions. Now, the government say this bill empowers local communities, but they've cut away the very funding that made neighbourhood planning possible. The neighbourhood planning programme, supported by the National Association of Local Councils, helped more than 2,000 communities write neighbourhood plans, yet ministers have scrapped it, at a time when they seek to railroad development across communities. Nolke is right when they say this move by the government weakens the very tier of democracy that should be strengthened. It's not empowerment, Madam Deputy Speaker, it's a contradiction. And my constituents know exactly what that means. Aldridge Brownhills is all too often treated as the dumping ground for housing numbers decided elsewhere. Communities...
Will she give way?
Of course I will.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. Does she agree with me that this devolution proposal put forward by the government is an urban-based model that cannot be applied to rural areas without fundamentally distorting the character of that area?
And my honourable friend absolutely hits the nail on the head here. His communities are not dissimilar to mine. On the edge of a large urban area, the West Midlands, Birmingham, and yet we're not deeply rural. But we're at real risk here of being subsumed into the suburbs of be it Walsall or Birmingham with no say in the matter. And like I said, my constituents know what this means. They feel that we have communities that are being done to, not worked with. And we've seen what happens when contradictory housing targets are imposed from above. Take the Black Country Plan. It was meant to be a model of strategic planning, but it collapsed. The plan fell apart because residents across the Black Country rightly lost confidence. It was plain wrong. And this bill repeats the same mistake, with powers to push development through, riding roughshod over local objections and concreting over our community's green spaces. Just look at the imbalance. We have Birmingham's housing targets falling, whilst Walsall's are rising by 27%. My constituency is told to take the strain while the second city offloads its numbers. It's not devolution, it's displacement, and it will only deepen distrust. Take Stonell Road, Longwood Lane, Bosty Lane, the list of speculative planning applications across my constituency goes on and on and on. And all of this before the Planning and Infrastructure Bill and even this legislation have been enacted. If this government were serious about empowerment, they would put a brownfield first duty into their reforms. They chose not to. The West Midlands has hundreds of hectares of derelict land that could be brought back to use. And there's funding for this already. The Brownfield Housing Fund, the National Competitive Fund, the Brownfield Infrastructure and Land Fund. But there's no requirement for the Mayor to use these funds first before he launches into our precious green belt and our green wedges. And without a statutory Brownfield first duty, we know that developers will always go for the easy option first. Take the Birch Lane proposal in Aldridge, hundreds of homes on Greenbelt land, rebranded now as Greybelt. That's precisely the kind of inappropriate development this bill will make harder to resist, with local consultees weakened and mayoral powers strengthened. This government is not building communities, it's dividing them. And what about infrastructure? My constituents were promised Aldridge train station. As many in here know, I talk a lot about that. Funding was secured, the business case made, yet the Labour Mayor diverted the money elsewhere. If he cannot deliver on those commitments, why should this House be handing him more commitments? There are also serious questions to answer about what exactly is grey belt, because regulations suggest it can be used to redefine a green belt site with building on 3 sides. This should alarm all of us in this place, because we in Aldridge Brown Hills are now at serious risk of being subsumed within a greater Birmingham and a greater Walsall. Don't get me wrong, we need houses. But let's give it some thought. Let's put them in the right place, and let's not lose our identity or our communities because of government diktat, because this is what it is. This government is making a complete mockery of what we call green belt and green wedges, which were there to protect communities from urban sprawl. And all this at a time when Birmingham Council can't even empty their bins. The Mayor has washed his hands of it. The Deputy Prime Minister doesn't seem interested. This bill, Madam Deputy Speaker, is not devolution. It's not empowerment. It is quite simply a developer's dream and a neighbourhood nightmare, and I will be voting against it tonight.
Sadiq Al-Hassan.
Deputy Speaker, having served as a town councillor and deputy mayor before election to this House, I have witnessed firsthand the critically overdue need for reform of our local and very local council systems. Town, parish or very local councils have been plagued by inefficiencies and toothless standards for too long, which is why I particularly support the reform of our local audit system outlined in this bill. My experiences and those regaled to me by others over the years have underscored the urgent need for an overhaul to ensure transparency, efficiency and accountability within our local governance structures. The government's commitment to reforming the local audit system is both timely and essential. The bill prioritises the establishment of a more coherent and reliable audit framework, which will undoubtedly build trust within our communities and foster a more robust democratic process. By addressing these systemic challenges, we are sending a clear message that councils must be accountable, that the integrity of their operations is paramount. Furthermore, these reforms represent a significant step towards greater devolution, empowering town and parish councils, such as those in North Somerset, to take decisive action tailored to the unique needs of their locals. However, we must go further. I believe it's crucial to introduce greater accountability through a compliance scoring system that clearly indicates to the public whether their elected representatives are undertaking best practices and demonstrating financial competence with their money. Internal audit parameters should be set nationally to ensure consistency and transparency, and we should focus on establishing effective minimum standards for councillors, ensuring there are proper consequences when acceptable behaviour is breached. This wouldn't just improve outcomes for our local communities, but also restore confidence in our local democracy. It would help to alleviate the ongoing issue with recruitment and retention of town and parish clerks nationally, who are impartial, objective legal advisors to the very local councils and tasked with ensuring that councils operate lawfully. I'm sure that many colleagues will have been made aware of some of the totally unacceptable behaviours that some town and parish clerks are subjected to, and which are enabled by a lack of effective recourse against the perpetrators. The ongoing loss of highly trained, experienced experts is a great loss to the sector. This recruitment crisis also hits the number willing to stand for very local councils, as potential councillors face the same unacceptable behaviours. We need professional regulation for councillors as an important first step. Monitoring officers must be properly funded through professional regulation fees paid by councils based on the number of their councillors. This would enable monitoring officers to perform their vital oversight function effectively. We cannot continue the current slide towards empty council chambers across our towns and villages, declining community involvement and in some areas poor standards of behaviour and conduct. The Localism Act of 2011 that came into force during the coalition government dismantled essential structures of accountability by abolishing the Standards Board for England. Since then, powers to suspend councillors who breach standards have been repealed, leaving councils with no substantive recourse against poor conduct. There is now no recourse for poor standards of behaviour. This legislative deficiency has allowed pockets of inadequate behaviour to persist unchallenged, undermining the very essence of local government. We must take this opportunity to effect new systems and processes and foster a new model of accountable politics at the local and very local level. I have seen myself how unacceptable behaviours in local councils can go entirely unchecked, eroding trust. This bill represents a chance to establish a higher standard and ensure that we have appropriate people serving our communities, cutting out the rot in some of our councils. If town and parish councils are to play a larger role in devolution of local services, which undoubtedly brings the benefits of greater ownership and influence to local communities, then it is essential that all councils are effectively held to the same high standards. I wish to point out, Madam Deputy Speaker, that there are very many local councils across the country which do a fabulous job, and some great ones in my constituency as well. And they're governed by extremely well, and they enrich their communities. But the minority risk tarnishing the wider reputation of the sector and creating disparity in terms of community benefit. This bill represents the foundation we should build upon to do better, to establish proper standards at the local level of democracy and ensure we have appropriate people serving our community.
Joe Robertson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Like I'm sure all members in this place, I support the principle of devolution and empowerment, the two words on the face of this bill. But this bill is about centralisation and disempowerment. For the Isle of Wight, it is about fusing our island with Hampshire, where the combined population, 93% of it, will live in Hampshire on the mainland, and just 7% will live on the island, under a combined mayor authority. There is no empowerment because island people will not get a say. The last time this plan was crystallised, under the previous Labour government, gave islanders a say through a local referendum, and islanders voted no, and the previous Labour government respected that vote. This government does not respect my constituents enough to ask them whether they are happy to be fused with a much, much larger county that sits across the water. It is centralising because my local authority, the Isle of Wight Council, will lose some powers. It will lose powers over strategic planning, so that a mayor who represents largely Hampshire voters will be able to allocate more housing on the island. And any mayor who is interested in getting re-elected will, of course, be responsive to the much larger voter cohort in Hampshire. There are three particularly offensive things about this bill that the government is imposing on my constituents. Our police authority is called Hampshire and Isle of Wight. Our health commissioning is called Hampshire and Isle of Wight. Our fire and rescue is called Hampshire and Isle of Wight. The vast majority of organisations that operate across our two counties is named after our two counties, Hampshire and Isle of Wight. This government is going to call our combined mayor authority Hampshire and Solent, removing our name potentially from all those organisations that the mayor will end up having power for, removing our name from our police, from our fire and rescue, from our health commissioning, and who knows what in the future. That will be done without anyone on the Isle of Wight having a say. The second offensive thing about this proposal for my constituency is the powers that it gives the mayor over local transport. The fact it has Solent in the title, yet the mayor will get no powers and no contingent powers over the biggest transport issue facing my residents, which is crossing the Solent on ferries. So Solent is in the name of the combined authority, but the mayor will get no powers over ferries. And our ferries are the only unregulated, entirely privatised, foreign-owned, debt-laden key transport provider in the UK, and this government that is prepared to nationalise railways, extend the arm of government in buses and put more money in roads, is not prepared to do anything about my constituents being left at the mercy of foreign-owned, debt-laden companies. Now, it has used some warm words. I will acknowledge that, and the Minister has visited the island. But this is the opportunity to deliver on those words and put powers in the hands of the Mayor to regulate cross-Solent transport. And finally, and really importantly, on ring-fence funding, because the Isle of Wight will be fused with Hampshire, the Mayor will be able to spend money as they wish across a homogenous single zone. There is no special provision in here for ensuring ring-fence funding for the Isle of Wight that cannot be raided for Hampshire. The local ICB is already raiding money from our hospice to spend it on Hampshire hospices. In the Mayor deal, we need powers to stop this happening. And finally, on that key transport issue, on the consultation of my constituents, the F word, ferries, was not even mentioned once.
Moon.
Whereas, Madam Deputy Speaker, on the 5th of March this year, the Prime Minister stood at the dispatch box and said these words: "We do recognise Cornish national minority status, not just the proud language, history and culture of Cornwall, but also its bright future. Since arriving in this place on the back of a pledge to ensure Cornwall is given the devolved powers and funding that we've been craving for centuries, and in line with our manifesto commitment to deliver on the greatest ever devolution powers out of Westminster, today is a significant milestone. So with the Prime Minister's commitment to Cornish national minority status very clearly reaffirmed, I support a bill that delivers tangible devolution to Cornwall. However, I would like to explore clarifications on the implications of this bill on the people of Cornwall. The land that you call Cornwall, Madam Deputy Speaker, we know as Cerno, a term believed to have been in use for over 2,000 years, and it means people of the promontory. However, the English word Cornwall has a different meaning. It means peninsula of foreigners. For centuries, the English have recognised the people of the land at the end of the peninsula as different from them. Right up to modern times, the UK government has continued to honour the distinct territorial integrity of Cornwall, treating us in unique and exceptional ways. Our constitutional status is perhaps most clearly outlined in a newspaper article in 2013 by the House of Lords researcher Kevin Cahill, who stated, "The whole territorial interest and dominion of the Crown in and over the entire county of Cornwall is vested in the Duke of Cornwall. So Cornwall is a separate kingdom." He continues, "I know the Cornish have been shouting about this for a long time, but they turn out to be right." In the creation of the Duchy of Cornwall in 1337, recognised the distinct history, identity and territory of Cornwall, a unique and exceptional constitutional settlement which we enjoy to this present day. In recent times, Cornwall has been the first rural area outside Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland to gain a devolution settlement over aspects of transport, education and renewable energy, and more recently over adult education, Cornish distinctiveness and the Cornish language. Indeed, some of the benefits offered in the devolution bill within a mayoral combined authority, Cornwall already enjoys. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm often asked, even by colleagues in this place, as a Cornishman, do I consider myself English? Along with hundreds of thousands of Cornish men and women, I'm often sadly mocked for my reply. So let me be absolutely clear today. I am Cornish, not English. Although I freely admit that some of my very best friends are English. And to those at home, particularly young people who've been equally ridiculed, I say to them, be loud and proud. It's okay to consider yourself Cornish and British. Now let me deal with the issue of identity versus status. Cornish national minority status and Cornish identity are sometimes conflated, but when discussing Cornish national minority status, references to identity can sometimes be considered belittling. This is not about identity. It's about a legally binding national minority status. Our status, formally agreed by the Council of Europe 10 years ago, must be respected, upheld and celebrated. I will give way.
Point, Maresta. I'm grateful to my honourable friend for giving way, and of course you'll be aware that in the previous parliaments I led campaigns to secure the recognition of the Cornish language and indeed the Cornish people. But does he not agree with me that this is not an issue of isolationism? It's not about cutting ourselves off, it's about cutting ourselves into the celebration of diversity, and to have the identity of a place properly recognised and respected so that it can grow rather than be suppressed. And surely devolution is about enabling places rather than controlling them, which I fear is what this bill is going to do.
I thank the Right Honourable Member for his intervention, and because of our geographical location, for centuries we have been a safe harbour, a port in the storm for peoples from all over the world. We are an inclusive society. But let me get straight to the nub of the issue, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Council of Europe Framework Convention on National Minority Status makes it very clear, and I quote Article 16 of the Convention, the parties shall refrain from measures which alter the proportions of the population in areas inhabited by persons belonging to national minorities and are aimed at restricting the rights and freedoms flowing from the principles enshrined by the present Framework Convention. In 2016, when passing comment on the then government's plans for redrawing boundaries, the Council of Europe Advisory Committee on the Framework Convention highlighted that Article 16 prohibits restricting the enjoyment of the rights of the Framework Convention in connection with redrawing borders. In relation to the bill currently drafted, Cornwall is prevented from accessing the highest level of devolution because to do so would require us to compromise our national minority status. During the course of this bill, I will work with the government to ensure that this bill is passed that respects Cornish national minority status and delivers an historic devolution arrangement that fulfils our manifesto